December 26, 1991, on the Siberian plains, Peter Rasputin was walking through the snow when a sudden flash of light washed over his face. He stumbled back a few steps and saw a circular patch of brightness reflected there. Turning toward it, he found a baby lying in the snow. Peter hurried over, scooped the infant up, and checked him carefully. The child was odd. A crystal monocle covered one eye, and a cold, eerie mask rested in his tiny hand. Peter didn't linger. After confirming the baby was still breathing, he took off his coat, wrapped the child against the cold, and began running for home. Who would abandon a baby out here, he thought. I'll get him inside and tell Mom and Dad. Bursting onto the family farm, he shouted into the house, "Dad, Mom, I found a baby!" Nikolai Rasputin, Peter's father, came out and stared in surprise at the child his son was holding. "Oh," he said, stepping closer to take a better look. "Alexandra, come out and see. Peter's brought back a baby." Alexandra hurried from the doorway and took the tiny bundle from Peter's arms. "Peter, where did you find him?" she asked. Peter scratched his head. "Just out in the snow, not far from the village. He only had a monocle and a mask on, no clothes at all." Alexandra peered down at the infant. Poor thing, left out in the cold. She lifted the monocle from the baby's face and held it up, turning it over in her hand. How strange. Who would put something like this on a newborn? Nikolai reached out and removed the little mask, inspecting it closely. "Maybe a keepsake his parents put on him," he said, voice low. "But given how he was found, I doubt we'll be able to track them down." "Dad, Mom, look, he's opened his eyes," Peter said, eyes widening. The baby had blinked awake and was staring up at them. The child's eyes were unlike any they'd seen, deep and unfathomable, as if they held many shifting layers, like a hidden cosmos. They drew everyone in, strangely beautiful and full of something mysterious. Alexandra looked at her husband. "Nikolai, let's adopt him. He could be a companion for little Ilyana." Nikolai nodded. "If we turn him over to the government in the current climate, who knows what they'll do? He might not survive a week." Peter whooped. "I have a little brother. What should we name him?" Alexandra asked her husband and son. "Amon," Nikolai said without hesitation. "Amon Rasputin." Peter cocked his head. "What does that mean?" "Amon was the sun god of Egypt," Nikolai explained. "I'll hope that, when he grows up, he'll bring light to this country." "Then Amon it is. Little Amon," Alexandra agreed. They carried the foundling back to the bedroom and laid him in the crib. Their newborn daughter, Ilyana Rasputin, slept in the other side of the same cradle. What they didn't realize was that the monocle and the mask they'd set aside, meant to help identify the boy's relatives, had somehow returned to him. Now the baby lay staring at the ceiling and at the girl beside him with eyes that did not belong to an infant. Meng felt as if he were still dreaming, but the vividness of it told him otherwise. He had transmigrated, and into a baby, of all things. He remembered the night before, staying up late in the dorm, reading a web novel he'd been following for over a year. It had finally ended, and his favorite character had been sent down what the fandom called the daddy route, a development Meng found infuriating. He'd gone to bed annoyed, half livid at the author, and fallen asleep with the taste of resentment still in his mouth. In the dream there had been a chill. At first he thought the dorm window must be open, but when he came to, the world was different. Several large faces leaned over him, their features enormous and close, eyes shining with curiosity. It took him a long time to sort the sensations in his head, the tiny limbs, the muffled sounds, the strange slowness of movement, and then the realization hit. He wasn't in the dorm. He wasn't himself. He'd transmigrated and become an infant. Yet something felt off. This baby wasn't entirely ordinary. Clutched in one tiny hand were a monocle and a peculiar, unsettling mask. Someone, adults nearby, murmuring softly, called the child Amon. The name settled into him like a label he hadn't asked for. Meng's mind spun. Had he become Amon? Or had he transmigrated into the celestial worthy from the novel? None of this matched the world of Lord of the Mysteries as he knew it. The surroundings, the objects in his hand, the way people looked at him, everything felt familiar and foreign at once. He blinked, trying to steady his thoughts, and waited for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. "They're speaking Russian. How am I supposed to understand that when I don't even know Russian?" Maybe it was because he'd become a baby, or maybe his mind was still tangled from the transmigration. Meng, no, Amon, closed his eyes and fell asleep again. 6 years later, a small boy sat beneath a bare tree, watching the distant snowfields. He was Amon, the man who had been transmigrated into this world. He let out a small, contented breath. 6 years since I arrived, he thought. Life isn't bad. I have parents, an older brother, and a little sister, unlike my previous life, when I was an orphan. It would be even better if this place weren't the Marvel Universe, but I can't have everything. I still don't know exactly how strong I am here. In those 6 years, he had slowly become familiar with his gifts. Compared to the originals from Lord of the Mysteries, he was a low-rank version of that power system. The monocle and the eerie mask he'd brought with him were actual uniquenesses, the monocle being the uniqueness of error and the mask the uniqueness of the fool. His eyes themselves were the uniqueness of the door. The most important thing, however, the Saphira castle that formed the backbone of a true Lord of the Mysteries had left no trace in this world. When he arrived in this world, the Saphira castle he'd expected to be with him was gone. Maybe it hadn't transferred when he transmigrated. Maybe something in the Marvel Universe had hidden it. Or, though that seemed the least likely, Amon himself was simply too weak to sense it yet. At 6 years old, he could barely call up the beyonder paths he knew as error, fool, and door. He was still a child. Give him a few years, and he might grow into the kind of power the blasphemer Amon held in the original Lord of the Mysteries. For now, his abilities were small, flickers rather than tools. He knew where he was because of the family that had taken him in. The people around him were the Rasputins, Colossus's family. The boy who had carried him out of the snow would one day be Peter Rasputin, the Colossus of X-Men. In the present, he was only a naive, art-loving teenager. The little girl at his side would grow into the infamous Hell Lord, Magic, Ilyana Rasputin, though at the moment she was still a child. Amon watched a snowball sail toward him. He didn't bother to dodge. He let it strike and burst apart over his head. "Ha! You big dummy, Amon. Can't even dodge a snowball." A small blonde girl laughed from across the yard. Amon brushed the snow from his hair, scooped up a handful from the ground, and shaped it into a tight ball. "Heh, Liana, I think I need to teach you a lesson. Time you learned who's in charge." "No way. I'm the boss. I'm the older sister," the little girl protested. Amon grinned. "I don't think so. I'm older than you. You're the younger sister." "No, I came first. You came later, so I'm the older sister." He let the snowball fly. It landed in Liana's hair with a soft thwack, and Amon's laughter rang out. "See? That doesn't count." Liana scooped up snow, packed it into a ball with determined little hands, and hurled it back. "Then whoever wins gets to be the older sister." "I'm the older brother," Amon said, and they erupted into a flurry of flying snow. But really, how could a little girl stand a chance against him? Chapter 2, the original chapter, was stolen by Amon. My reader count suddenly jumped, and to avoid a copyright takedown and the hassle of refunds, I deleted the chapter that originally introduced the Lord of the Mysteries abilities. I did take screenshots of the original text, though, and I'll post them in the comments or the discussion thread for this chapter for anyone who wants to see them. Because the platform requires a minimum word count of 1,000 to post a new chapter, and I didn't meet it, I can't simply re-upload that material here. So instead, I'll talk about something related. The Amon in this story is a transmigrator. Before he transmigrated, he was just an ordinary college student, very different from the naturally born divine being called Amon in Lord of the Mysteries. Writing the latter would be difficult. A naturally divine Amon would have little humanity, acting only from divinity, aloof, self-interested, and hard to relate to. That's not the kind of character I wanted to tackle. So I changed course. In this version, Amon transmigrates as an infant, similar to the Snake of Fate. Starting life in a newborn body erases much of his prior divinity, letting him grow and change gradually. That made him easier to write and allowed me to explore his development more naturally. The point of his development here isn't about gaining new powers so much as finding a balance between divinity and humanity. He needs people and things he cares about. He can't be completely dominated by Godhood. That's why I had him transmigrate as an infant. If he'd simply been made a full king of angels from the start, I'd essentially be recreating Amon straight out of Lord of the Mysteries. The kind of Amon who had the ancient sun god and the Medici looking after him. That version would have had his humanity entirely washed away by that terrifying divinity. Besides, it's easier to write this way. Also, thank you to everyone who sent me rewards recently. Acknowledgements. Special thanks to Cute Lazy, Menguringi, Little Cat, Jimmy Hua, A Heart Tea, Shuanglang Deshazi, Lin Xinyo from Linde Hall, Wang Dawei from Fangkun Mountain, Wuhong Kunle Dan Bushui, user 44284638, Sihai Shi Yanchong, Yuanhuan, who loves eating spicy dried tofu, Hui Zhengshou number 233, Tai Motion, Earl of the Fallen, Feng Dek Nian, Error and the World Lives On, Dong Qingkeng, Qing Yue King, The Twilight Land of Dusk, Jing Jinghu, Hao Xiao, user 39894892, Sugura Ao from Jiangnan Grand Restaurant, Kang Shifu, who travels alone for thousands of miles. Can't even change to a good name. Feng Qingwan, who loves eating sweet and sour apples. Zuo Shang, who likes Mengbasho. Cautious comments. Su Yun, who likes Guofangfeng. Angxiang Shuying from Shi Haiko, Mr. I don't see the chapter text, only the acknowledgements list. I can't rewrite the chapter until you paste it. Meanwhile, I've cleaned up the acknowledgements you provided into idiomatic English. If you post the chapter next, I'll revise it into a polished, natural-sounding version while keeping all plot points and details. Polished acknowledgements Z of the Aurora Order. Acknowledgements. Thanks to Envy Love. Thanks to Book Mountain Pressure, Big or Not. Thanks to Abba Abba. Thanks to user 782488019. Thanks to Juding. Thanks to 3125. Escapist. Thanks to user 927556884. Thanks to Time Stays. Thanks to Zhenchuandao Ren, Southern Xinjiang. Thanks to Xiao Ba, who loves longan shuttlefish. Thanks to Mo Fengling, who loves mulberries. Thanks to Fuguang 1. Thanks to SCP-0372. Thanks to Rui, at a loss. Thanks to Call Me Handsome Guy, not Sablefur. Thanks to Lai Liju from our village. Thanks to Meng Wang 233. Thanks to user 389970905. Thanks to Long Huangdao, who loves holly trees. Thanks to Chu Rubai, in a precarious situation. Thanks to Wu Ye, mentally unusual. Thanks to Absolutely Unique. Thanks to A Year of Wishes Coming True. Thanks to Tunfa Tongzi, always present. Thanks to Feng Wuxi, that's me. NKS to Yue Xiaolu from Jotian Cave Mansion. Thanks to Chu Shun, who loves stir-fried chili and preserved eggs. Thanks to Xiao Hai. Thanks to user 248455323. Thanks to Ben815. Thanks to Eric's. Thanks to Zangshu. What I need from you. Paste the chapter text you want revised. You can paste it in multiple messages if it's long. Tell me any preferences for tone, e.g. formal, casual, poetic, target audience, or whether you want dialogue preserved exactly. If the chapter is machine translated, tell me the original language, likely Chinese, and whether you want me to preserve specific names or terms exactly as given. Once you post the chapter, I'll produce a clean, idiomatic English version ready for readers. Special thanks to user 209363, to Will, who's out of books again, to user 1667395151, to Juye Jiangkao, to Esxdieter, to Yuaner from Pengzhou, to So Annoying, to Orange Juice Soda, to Feng Huang, who loves Wutong, Chinese parasol trees, to user 1071958, and to all the readers who liked and commented. Thank you all. Chapter 3, Awakening, Ileana, Amon, Time to Come In. Peter called across the yard to the two of them playing in the snow. Okay, Amon shouted back, then hurled a large snowball at Ileana. Ha! You lost. Now call me Big Brother, he teased. Ileana stood up, brushed snow from her coat, and replied, unimpressed. Humph, I'm done. It's time to go home. This doesn't count. We'll have a rematch later. Heh, yeah, same old, Amon said, amused. She scowled, ignored him, and ran over to Peter. Amon followed, and the three children trudged back toward the farmhouse. When they pushed open the front door, Amon immediately felt that something was wrong. The room was heavy with grief. Nikolai sat slumped on the sofa, almost dazed, while Alexandra clung to him, sobbing into his chest. The sight of their parents so distraught made Peter's stomach drop. "Father, what happened?" he asked, looking for an explanation from the steady hand of the family rather than his weeping mother. Nikolai swallowed, and with a voice thick with sorrow said, "Pyotr Mikhail, he was killed in the line of duty on a mission." Peter stared at the envelope as if it had burned him. For a moment he could only repeat, stunned, "That can't be. My brother, Mikhail, he's one of the best. He's an astronaut. He wouldn't." "This came from government officials," Nikolai said quietly, passing the envelope across the table. Peter snatched it up and read too fast to take it in. The letter slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. He sank to his knees, eyes hollow. No, I don't believe it. I won't believe it." With that, he sprang to his feet and bolted for the door. "Peter, don't be so impulsive." Nikolai shot after him, but paused at the doorway long enough to turn back. "Amon, Ilyana, look after Mother. I'm going to find out what's happened to your brother." Then he hurried out. Amon stooped and picked the fallen letter from the carpet. The brief clinical note said that Mikhail and the rest of his crew had been on a mission when, for reasons unknown, all contact was lost. Despite exhaustive attempts to re-establish communication, the government had been unable to reach them and, with great regret, had declared them deceased. No further details were given. The letter cited national security as the reason for withholding specifics. As Amon finished reading, he felt a hand clamped tightly around his arm. Liana's voice trembled as she asked through her tears, "Amon, is Big Brother really dead?" Amon looked down at the sheet from the government and spoke carefully. "It doesn't say he's dead. The report only says they couldn't establish contact with Mikhail. It could mean he's trapped somewhere and can't get a message out." "Really?" Liana wiped her face and reached for anything to hold on to. "Really? Big Brother will be all right?" Amon tried to sound as certain as he could. "Yes, he might still be alive." Their mother, who had been standing nearby, heard him. She knew as well as anyone that the chance was slim, that the government wording was often a euphemism. Still, the smallest sliver of hope was something a mother couldn't let go of. She stepped forward, pulled Amon and Liana into a hug, and pressed them both against her. "Mikhail will be fine," she murmured fiercely, then repeated it louder. "He'll be fine. He has to be." Peter, meanwhile, had fled from the house. He ran without a destination, the street lights blurring as he simply put one foot in front of the other, desperate to be alone. Mikhail had always been his hero. Top grades, a place at the military academy, then the army, and finally selected to be an astronaut. Peter had spent his childhood trying to follow in his brother's footsteps. For years, his biggest dream was to become an astronaut like Mikhail. He didn't notice at first that something was changing. As he ran, his clothes started to feel tighter. His breath came quicker, and a strange warmth crawled across his skin. Without him realizing it, his body began to grow, subtly at first, then more noticeably, and a metallic sheen spray over his skin, catching the light and turning him, piece by piece, into something unfamiliar. He felt it happen slowly, like metal cooling and reshaping from the inside out. When it finished, he was no longer just Peter. He was a silver-white figure, his skin gleaming like hammered iron. He found himself walking toward the withered tree where Amon had been leaning before, needing something to hit to blow off the fear and confusion. He swung once, hard. There was a single, thunderous crack, and the trunk split as if struck by a sledgehammer. For a long moment he just stood there, stunned. Then he looked down at his hands and saw reflected in the pale light not flesh at all, but cold, metallic fingers. "What's wrong with me?" he whispered. From behind him came a voice he knew like a map of weathered streets. "Pyotr? Pyotr, is that you?" His father, Nikolai, sounded small and frightened. Peter stared at his father. "Father, what's happened to me?" Nikolai's own shock was obvious, but he steadied himself and forced his voice calm. "Pyotr, come home. Don't let anyone see you like this. Can you change back?" The word mutant had appeared in newspapers for years, men who could bend metal with a thought, stories on the news, but Nikolai had never imagined his own son could be one of them. He kept his hand on Peter's shoulder as if grounding him. "We'll get you inside," he said. "It'll be all right." Peter shook his head, helpless. "I don't know. I can't change back." Nikolai didn't hesitate. He pulled his son toward the farmhouse, every step heavy with fear and resolve. Peter was his child. Mutant or not, he would not abandon him. As they turned to head back to the farm, Nikolai felt the resistance in the air ease. He glanced back and saw that his son had returned to his normal appearance. "Piotr, you're back to normal," he said. Piotr lifted his right hand and watched the metallic sheen fade. His skin was flesh-colored again. "It seems so," he replied. "Good." Nikolai exhaled. "Get home quickly. Don't give your mother any more worry. She just lost your older brother. Don't let her be shocked again." Piotr's face tightened as he thought of his mother and of how haggard she had looked the moment he first came into the house. "I won't let her worry," he said solemnly. Amon stayed behind to comfort his sister and their mother, but his mind was elsewhere. He turned the subject of his eldest brother over and over in his head. Mikhail. Mikhail wasn't Amon's blood brother, but he had always been kind to him. In fact, Amon had only met him 3 times. The first meeting had been when Amon was just 1 year old. As soon as Mikhail learned Amon was adopted, he even used his government contacts to try to find Amon's birth family. The search had turned up nothing, an outcome that, in hindsight, felt inevitable. Amon still had no idea how he had transmigrated, but one thing was certain: the body he inhabited did not originate from this world. If any of his blood relatives had been here, Amon was confident that, with his current abilities, he would have found them. He had tried everything: divination, glimpses into fate, yet turned up nothing. That only confirmed his suspicion. This body belonged elsewhere. He remembered his encounters with the man everyone called the convenient older brother. Their second meeting had been when Amon was 3. The most recent meeting had been only last year. The brother had arrived bearing gifts for Amon and Liana and spent the afternoon playing games with them. Mentally, Amon considered himself an adult and found it odd to enjoy children's pastimes, but in a child's body he couldn't help smiling as he played with Liana. Lost in those thoughts, Amon looked up as Nikolai returned, accompanied by Peter. Amon's eyes narrowed. Peter looked different, stronger, somehow. Inwardly, Amon concluded, he's awakened his abilities. The family gathered in the living room in heavy silence. After a long pause, Father Nikolai finally spoke. "Tomorrow I'll go to the relevant government office and find out exactly what happened to Mikhail." "A simple state secret won't do," Nikolai said. "Father, I'll go with you." Peter hurried after him. Nikolai met his son's eyes and saw a hard, steady resolve there. "All right," he said finally. "You come with me." At first Nikolai had wanted to refuse. Peter was a mutant, and if anyone found out it would bring untold trouble. But his son's determination softened him. Their farm lay more than 300 kilometers from Irkutsk. Nikolai had an old pickup truck. Under good conditions, the driving alone would be at least 12 hours round trip. In winter, on the Siberian plain, roads and weather could make it much worse. Between slow stretches, possible delays, and whatever business they had in the city, the whole outing would likely take 3 or 4 days. Going together, at least, meant they could lean on each other. Chapter 4. Amon, Moon Exploration. That night in Amon's room, which he shared with little Ilyana and which had 2 beds, he suddenly sat bolt upright. Images of doors, layers of shimmering portals, flashed behind his eyelids and vanished. He pressed the monocle that had materialized over his right eye and glanced toward Ilyana's bed. Something's wrong. Someone's trying to teleport Ilyana away, he thought, already throwing back the covers and crossing the room. Ilyana lay tossing in sleep, her face twisted as if in a nightmare. A faint blue glow danced around her body. Amon felt his pulse quicken with relief. She was close enough for him to interfere and disrupt the teleportation in time. If she'd been anywhere else, she would have vanished. "Ilyana, wake up. Don't sleep," he said, shaking her gently. She jerked awake, eyes wild. Seeing Amon at the foot of the bed, she leapt toward him and clung to his chest, sobbing. "Amon, a demon tried to take me, big and hideous, all in fire. It scared me to death." "Don't worry, I'm here," he soothed, pulling her close. "It can't catch you." Amon soothed the little girl, his right eye monocle glowing faintly as he ran the readings through his head. Decryption confirms this power comes from another dimension. If my guess is right, it's the work of Belasco, the Lord of Limbo. He remembered the stories. Belasco, ruler of the extra-dimensional realm called Limbo, had once taken advantage of Ilyana's connection to that place. When her mutant power first showed itself, he'd kidnapped her as a child and dragged her into Limbo, hoping to bend the realm to his will through her. She'd fought back, defeated him, and limbo had become hers. "All right, little Ileana, don't cry," Amon said softly. Then, with a small, uncanny motion, he slid his hand into his own chest and drew out a translucent, oddly shaped key. He smiled as he placed it in her palm. "Wear this, and you won't have to fear the devil anymore. Brother will protect you." He threaded a cord through the key and hung it gently around her neck. "Thank you, Amon," the child whispered, and as the small charm rested against her chest, the tremor of fear in her shoulders eased. "But I'm the older sister." Amon only smiled and didn't argue. What he'd given little Liana was a Beyonder trait usually found in a Sequence 3 Wanderer of the Door pathway. With it, she would be largely immune to spatial powers and wouldn't have to fear being snatched by Belasco. Because he'd transferred it under his master's careful handling, the trait's usual side effects were almost non-existent. Amon had long since noticed that, aside from the uniquenesses, Error, Fool, and Door, his body carried a surprising number of minor Beyonder traits from those same pathways, particularly many below Sequence 2, Angel. They had slightly bolstered his abilities, but only marginally. Removing such low-level traits had no noticeable impact on him. "All right, go to sleep," he said. "Amon, you sleep too," the little girl replied, then lay back on her bed and slipped into dreams. Amon moved to the window and watched a pigeon perched on a tree in the yard. Hardy birds like that could survive the Siberian winter without migrating south. Amon pinched the monocle over his right eye. The pigeon perched in the tree, as if answering him, produced a monocle out of thin air and slipped it over its own right eye. It beat its wings twice and shot toward the Russian Federal Space Agency. An ordinary pigeon would need days to cover that distance. The air in front of this one seemed to fold and compress. In the blink of an eye, it had crossed more than 10 kilometers. At that speed, it would be at its destination within minutes. "I want to see what the government is hiding," Amon thought, then eased back under the covers and went to sleep. The pigeon at the window was no ordinary bird. Amon had parasitized it with the error pathway, turning it into a remote clone. Under his control, it also carried abilities from the Fool and Door pathways, an unusually complete set of powers. The parasitism worked perfectly. The bird, now an extension of Amon, reached the agency and casually approached a guard, then siphoned the man's memories as if taking a handful of sand. Amon, now in the body of a pigeon, scanned the layout of the aerospace agency and flew straight for the command center. He landed outside the building, took a quick look around, then phased through the outer wall and slipped inside. He cloaked himself with a simple illusion so none of the staff noticed his presence. He located the highest-ranking official he could find and reached into the man's mind, stealing his memories. What he uncovered was disturbingly specific. A secret lunar orbit project, an expedition to the moon's far side, a spacecraft that had suddenly lost contact, all 4 astronauts missing, and a classified connection to a Hydra resurgence. Top secret. What a pain. They actually went to the moon, and Hydra's involved, Amon muttered. The whole thing smelled wrong. In this Marvel world, Russia's aerospace capabilities far outstripped those of the real world. Indeed, they were even more advanced than before Amon's transmigration, so a mere equipment failure seemed unlikely. Foul play looked much more plausible. To be safe, Amon performed a shallow-level parasitic implant on the agency executive, leaving a worm of time inside him to monitor and subtly influence the man's thoughts. Because the pigeon form of Amon didn't carry much of his Beyonder essence, the duplicate he left at the aerospace agency was only a weak Sequence 4 copy. He'd already gathered everything he needed. Looking up, the full moon gleamed in the monocle over his eye, door-like patterns rippling across the lens. With the Wanderer ability, he stepped off Earth and was instantly on the moon. "Time for a lunar exploration trip," he quipped. Early the next morning, Alexandra walked the children, Amon and Ileana, to see Nikolai and Peter off. The father and son were driving to Irkutsk to check with the relevant departments about Mikhail, at the very least to find out which mission he'd been on when the accident happened. After the car pulled away, a gray pigeon slipped into formation behind them, a tiny monocle fixed over its right eye. That pigeon was the weak clone Amon had left behind to shadow the pair and prevent any trouble. Peter had already awakened his mutant ability, and traveling made him conspicuous and vulnerable to unwanted attention. Relations between mutants and the world's governments had grown dangerously strained. Agencies hunted for any excuse to arrest mutants as terrorists, and lone individuals were especially vulnerable. If Peter's steel body were ever exposed in public, the Russian government would almost certainly move to detain him. Amon didn't want that to happen. It would be a nightmare to deal with. That night, in Amon's small room, he sat beside the child and spoke with careful seriousness. "Liana, you mustn't tell anyone about what happened last night." The little girl toyed with the tiny key pendant at her throat. "Not Mom, not Dad, not even second brother?" she asked, eyes wide. "Not even them," Amon said firmly. "No one. This is our secret." "Our secret," Liana repeated, beaming. "I promise I'll keep it." Her face lit up with the kind of solemn pride only a child could show, delighted to be trusted, determined to protect what she'd been told. Chapter 5. Decepticons and Archenemies. Soldiers herded Peter and his father, Nikolai, out of the Irkutsk Military Aerospace Administration. "Sir, this concerns military secrets and national security. Please leave and do not return," one of them barked. They had been inside for more than a day. Every time they pressed for answers, officials stalled. It needs approval from higher-ups, they were told, and nothing had been resolved. At last, a pot-bellied officer reappeared, repeated the same line about national security, and dismissed them without another word. Peter exploded. "How can you do this? We've been here since yesterday, and you've been dragging your feet the whole time, and now you just shut us out. My brother is an excellent astronaut. He's a hero of this country, and this is how you treat him. I'll sue you." His angry voice carried down the street and drew a small crowd. Nikolai stepped in quickly and gripped his son's arm. "Piotr, stop," he hissed, pulling him back. If Peter had lunged forward, he would have run straight into the soldiers and the officer. Nikolai knew better than to let him make a scene. "Sir, mind your language," the stout officer said flatly, then turned and walked back into the administration without looking back. The man's perfunctory dismissal and the way he'd brushed off the whole situation made Peter's blood boil. His metallic skin surfaced without warning. In an instant, Peter had shifted into his metal form. Nikolai yanked off his jacket and tried to drape it over Peter's exposed arms, but Peter's body swelled as it metallized, and the fabric barely came close to covering him. "It's a mutant," someone shouted. The gathered crowd recoiled. A few people screamed and ran. More people pulled out phones, eager to record. To most citizens, mutants were synonymous with disaster, objects of fear and loathing, often treated like a public menace. The soldiers posted outside the administration saw Peter's transformation and raised their rifles, fingers tightening on triggers. Nikolai planted himself between Peter and the soldiers. "It's a misunderstanding. Please, we'll leave right away," he called, his voice pleading as he tried to shield Peter. The soldiers didn't lower their guns. The officer stepped back outside, took in the scene, then motioned to the soldiers behind him. They moved in at once. More troops poured out of the Military Aerospace Administration and formed concentric rings around Peter and Nikolai. Within seconds, they were surrounded on all sides, rifles trained on them. "Father, what do we do?" Peter whispered, panic in his voice. He'd never seen anything like this, so many guns pointed at them. "Stay calm. Don't say anything." "Leave it to me," Nikolai said, forcing himself to keep his voice steady. From a window in a nearby building, a gray pigeon named Amon watched and exhaled with a resigned sigh. "Of course something would go wrong," he muttered. "I'll have to handle this myself. The main unit should have taken care of it and brought Mikhail back faster." A small monocular device over Amon's right eye flickered and sent out a pale pulse. Memories of everyone nearby, except for Peter and Nikolai, were plucked away. The pigeon even erased photographs and videos on phones and those already uploaded to the internet, leaving no trace of what had happened. A second flash swept from the monocular. Amon reached into Peter and ripped out his mutant power. For the next 48 hours, Peter would be unable to use his steel transformation ability. A flash like a falling star lit the night, and Peter and Nikolai found themselves back in their pickup truck. For a long beat, neither of them knew how they'd gotten there. Both looked at one another, wide-eyed and disoriented. Outside the administration building, the crowd froze as well. For a few stunned seconds, everyone simply stood. Then one by one they slid into bewilderment. People didn't remember why they'd been gathered or what they'd been doing just moments ago. The blankness lingered like the tail of the light that had come and gone. Perched nearby, the gray pigeon Amon, who had already siphoned a trace of Peter's mutant power, ran a quick analysis. He had always assumed Colossus's gift was a straightforward physical change, a turning of flesh to steel. What the data showed instead was far stranger. Peter's power didn't merely harden his body. It summoned particular metal atoms from an alternate dimension and swapped them with his own atoms, producing the metallic transformation. In other words, it was an interdimensional exchange, not a simple biochemical mutation. If that was true, Amon thought, then there was something unusual in the Rasputin bloodline, some genetic trait that let them connect to another dimension. No wonder the similarities between Peter and Piotr had seemed so uncanny. They were more than family resemblances. Inside the cab, Peter folded his hands in his lap and looked at his father, face clouded with worry. "Dad," he said, voice small and defeated, "what should we do? Should we keep asking?" Nikolai drew a deep breath and started the engine. "No, we must have been rescued. I saw on TV that some mutants can do spatial transfer. Whoever saved us probably has spatial abilities. Let's go back. We won't get any answers out here." Peter's fist clenched for a moment, then relaxed. He muttered, "Okay." On the moon, a man in a pointed soft hat and flowing traditional robe paced across the gray plain. His steps were slow, but each one spanned an incredible distance. He was an Amon avatar, a Sequence 3 demigod of the Gusangia. For someone of his rank, changing appearance and size, even shifting from animal form to human, was effortless. He favored the garb of the god of deceit from the Mysteries series and had assumed that look now. As he crossed the barren surface, the avatar adjusted the monocular over his right eye. He sensed something under his feet. With a flick of his hand, he cast a simple wind spell. The regolith whipped away in a gust, exposing a partially buried, several-meter-tall metal robot. "It actually has a spiritual thread. It's a sentient life form," he exclaimed. "Is this the legendary silicon-based life form?" Amon muttered. His right hand shot out and snatched a glowing energy block from the air. Interesting. A Decepticon. So this universe didn't just have Marvel characters, it had Transformers too. He slammed the cube into the lunar surface. A fierce gust ripped across the moon, blowing back regolith and revealing rows upon rows of metal bodies laid out on the plain. Dozens, no, hundreds of Cybertronians, all of them Decepticons. If he needed one, he could always find an Autobot to drive, he thought casually. They were scattered and inert. Amon paid them little heed. They posed no immediate threat. He already had the feeling that whatever had taken Mikhail lay farther ahead. Using his ability to steal and compress space, Amon's avatar folded the distance in a blink and materialized before a huge starship. The vessel was enormous, its hull split and mangled beyond recognition. Inside, the wreckage was just as wrecked. Torn metal, scorched conduits, and craters of twisted alloy. In one section, a thick layer of lunar dust had settled. Amon brushed it away and revealed an equally enormous metal face, half buried in the soil. "Sentinel Prime?" he murmured. He pushed on, exploring the area around the crippled ship. Near the wreckage, a ring of tall, humming pillars rose from the ground, energy spires glowing with a dull, steady light. The energy pillars were Cybertronian devices, powerful spatial engines used to open space bridges. The Amon avatar's eyes glazed over as images unspooled before him. Scenes from this place, replaying backward from the present into the past. For a long stretch, it had been nothing but a barren landscape, until about a month ago when that stillness was broken. 4 astronauts had landed on the moon. The flags on their suits identified them as Russians, and the leader, whom Amon recognized as his nominal elder brother, Mikhail, led them ashore. They erst explored a hulking, decayed starship, then spread out to survey the surrounding terrain. At the edge of the area where the Amon avatar stood, they found the same energy pillars. While examining them, for reasons unknown, they triggered the pillars. A flash of blue light filled the scene, and the 4 astronauts, Mikhail among them, simply vanished. Chapter 6. Toy Dimension. Under the influence of the energy column, Mikhail's mutant power flared, and that feedback into the column triggered a spatial transmission. So troublesome, Amon Avatar snapped, kicking the pillar at his feet. A cascade of overlapping doors flickered before his eyes as the same spatial energy that had swallowed Mikhail and the others reappeared. Amon thrust his hand into the blue glow, and in an instant, his whole body vanished. Inside the chaotic void, guided by a sudden instinct, Amon thrust his hands forward, tore a seam in the fabric of space, and dove through. In the pocket dimension, a dusky violet rift split open. A pair of hands forced their way out, gripping the edges and pushing them wider, and Amon stepped through. No sooner had he entered than his body began to change. His fingers shortened and thickened, taking on a cloth-like texture. He was beginning to turn into a doll. He shook his right hand, and small, granular nodules formed on the transformed skin, knitting the damaged-looking fibers back into a normal appearance almost as quickly as they had altered. This dimension assimilates anything that enters it, turning them into dolls. That's why the creatures here don't need to eat. Dolls don't require food. A flash of light danced across Amon Avatar's monocle and eyes as he dissected the dimension in an instant. He already had a preliminary read. This place had nothing to do with Cybertron's energy column. The column had only served to trigger Mikhail's mutant power. It was Mikhail's ability that had drawn him and his companions here. As Amon thought, the connection became clear. Of course, the Rasputin family's mutant powers were all tied to dimensions. The pocket dimension shuddered around him. The ground split and crumbled like a pile of snapping building blocks. From the widening fissures, a colossal dragon squeezed free, its body assembled from the same blocky pieces, as if constructed from toys. The block dragon spotted Amon at once. It opened a monstrous maw and expelled a stream of comically bright, cartoon-like dragon flame straight at him. Amon hissed inwardly. So the master found me. No wonder. When I came in, I didn't bother to hide my aura, and I resisted the dimension's rules. If he couldn't find me even now, that dimension master would be hopelessly incompetent. With a flash of starlight, Amon dodged the exhaled dragon flame. Where he had been standing, the blast struck the ground and turned the soil into a scatter of multicolored crystals. An interesting tactic, Amon Avatar mused, leaning forward to examine the crystallized floor. The block dragon showed little sign of intelligence. It made no attempt at communication, only kept belching dragon flame. Amon's reaction was equally straightforward. He reached out with his right hand and absorbed every blast the creature threw at him, plucking the attacks from the air as if they were ornaments. As he toyed with the beast, a new pressure pressed down on him, a living, compressing sensation. The world around Amon seemed to fold in on itself, contracting until the air and light sealed into a crystal cylinder the size of a shipping container. Doors formed in the crystal's surface, and Amon simply walked out. A voice, distant but clear, said, "The master is coming. He doesn't look like he'll be easy to deal with. I'd better slip away." With that, Amon's avatar dissolved into a scatter of starlight and vanished. From the brief exchange he had just had, he could tell the Dimension Master was at least angel level. Winning a straight fight was unlikely. He would have to call his main body. So Amon chose a different approach. He folded into the secrecy domain and went into hiding. Once he located Mikhail, he would snatch him and leave, avoiding any direct clash with the Dimension Master. As long as he stayed concealed, the authority of secrecy would make him extremely difficult to detect, even for a Dimension Master. Somewhere inside the pocket dimension lay a city built of toy blocks, populated by familiar earth playth, ings, and dolls. At its center stood a great arena, a miniature Colosseum. Amon's avatar had adopted a chibi, Q-version appearance and sat in the spectator stands with the other dolls, watching the contests below. A toy robot had just ripped a cowboy rag doll in half. Cotton and stuffing burst out everywhere. The dolls in the stands erupted into cheers. Amon Avatar found himself clapping along with them. At the very center of the spectator tier was a special seat, a huge throne, and on it sat a doll wearing a crown. Amon recognized the crowned figure at once, the Dimension Master of this realm. A rag doll, torn clean in two, was nearby but not dead. The half with the head was still moving, gathering its scattered cotton. It would be an easy recovery once sewn back together, though its appearance would never be quite the same. Amon frowned. This place reminded him of Sakar's Grandmaster and his arena. What a similar taste for spectacle. He hadn't come for the show. He had divined that his elder brother, Mikhail, was here. If the Dimension Master hadn't been present, Amon could have used his abilities to take Mikhail away without trouble. But with the Master sitting on that throne and every move watched, things just got a lot more complicated. "They're out!" someone in the stands gasped. Amon squinted, and his eyes lit up. After the ragged cowboy puppet was swept off the stage, 4 dolls in battered astronaut suits climbed into the arena. They looked like cheap copies of Buzz Lightyear, only sadder. 2 were missing arms and legs. The other 2 bore obvious repairs, patched seams and crude metal fastenings that spoke of past battles. "Big brother, I found you," Amon Avatar thought, the words rising in his mind before he could stop them. The 4 astronauts were Mikhail and his 3 companions. After being dragged into this world, they'd been captured by the Dimension Master's lackeys and forced to fight as gladiators. The guard doll at the entrance suddenly froze. Without warning, it reached into its chest, produced a small monocle, and fitted it over its right eye. Amon recognized it immediately. The guard was one of his secret puppets. As toys, these creatures all displayed roughly the intelligence of a 10-year-old, the same level the robot fighters in the arena showed. Working together, Mikhail and his 3 well-trained astronaut dolls, they made short work of the toy robots. When the skirmish was over, the 4 walked back toward the gate they had come through. Pavel lifted his transparent helmet and let out a frustrated breath. "When will this damned life end? My right arm was broken in the last fight, and now I have to go in for repairs again." Mikhail, captain of the 4, caught his eye and tried to reassure him. "Pavel, there will be a way out. I found out that star gladiators can decide their own fate in the arena. I don't think it will be long before we can leave." Pavel snorted. "I mean, leave this toy world." His words died away, and the 4 of them fell silent. They had been stuck in this toy world for a month, had tried everything they could think of, and still saw no hope of getting out. "Hey, want to get out of here? I can help!" They had just come back through the arena entrance when the guard puppet's teasing, casual voice cut across them. The 4 of them snapped their heads around at once, eyes sharpening like jackals scenting fresh prey. "What did you say?" Mikhail asked, holding his eager companions back with a heavy hand. Even restrained, the excitement in the others was plain to see. The puppet's smile widened until it dazzled. "I can take you out of this world." "Really?" This time even Mikhail couldn't hide how much he wanted to leave this miniature, toy-like realm. "Of course." The puppet's tone slid into something almost hypnotic. Its wooden limbs began to writhe. The stiff joints creaked and melted as the figure reshaped itself. When the shifting stopped, where a puppet had stood was a man-shaped Amon Avatar. A pointed soft hat perched on his head, a long classical robe draped about him, and a crystal-ground monocle fixed over his right eye. He looked startlingly human. The change made one thing clear. They'd swapped places with the Bizarro sorcerer. The sorcerer, who had been standing guard, was now up in the spectator stands, watching the gladiatorial combat as if nothing unusual had happened. It was the kind of power a Sequence 4 Bizarro sorcerer on the Fool pathway might have, the ability to swap places with another Bizarro sorcerer within a certain range, making that other sorcerer the primary body. The figure in front of them, Amon's avatar, used that power now. "Those who want to leave, come closer," the avatar said. They stared. For the first time since arriving in this world and being twisted into toy-like bodies, the 4 almost wept at the sight of a normal human face. The avatar looked exactly like a real person. They obeyed and stepped toward him. Starlight danced around them, and a sudden, disorienting vertigo slammed into their heads. When the world steadied, they were somewhere else entirely, a bleak, empty stretch of land. No puppets, no trappings, just open, desolate ground. The 4 astronauts blinked, shaking off the dizziness. Captain Mikhail, watching the avatar fiddle with his monocle, spoke first. "Are you a mutant?" "As far as I know, only mutants can do something like that." "Guess," the avatar answered, voice irritatingly smug. Mikhail opened his mouth and closed it again, unsure what to say. Before anyone could press the matter further, the man who had saved them in the arena, their mysterious rescuer, began tracing unfamiliar hand seals. Starlight coalesced at his fingertips until a doorway, woven from countless specks of light, formed before them. Quick, get through the star door, and you can return to the real universe. We'll deal with everything else later. The Amon avatar barked, urgency sharp in his voice. He thrust his right hand forward. The noise of the arena died away, as if the place had been cut off from the rest of the world. Light raced across the floor and columns until the entire arena was transformed into crystal, stone, architecture. Even the puppets inside took on a translucent, glassy sheen. A crowned puppet stalked through the frozen corridors, its steps ringing as it scanned for an intruder's aura. That intruder from another dimension, it muttered, voice like ice. He abducted 4 people from the real world and ran off. Then the puppet's head snapped toward the distant desert. There, it hissed, and disappeared in an instant from where it stood. Out on the sand, the 4 abducted astronauts, elite, rigorously trained, were indeed where the puppet had looked. The puppet had found them. Mikhail and his teammates watched the scene unfold. From the avatar's sharp movements and tone, they knew there was no time to waste. Mikhail didn't hesitate. Go, he ordered. The 3 other astronauts moved immediately, decisive and practiced. They stepped through the star door without a second thought. When Mikhail saw his teammates were through, he spared the Amon avatar a quick glance and followed them into the portal. In an instant, a torrent of crystals fell from the sky, turning the desert into a forest of glittering spires. The air itself seemed to harden. The surrounding space tightened and crackled, making teleportation and sudden movement far more difficult. Amon's avatar had no time to dodge. A crystal slammed into him and flattened him like a paper puppet with a sickening crack. But the flattened figure was only a decoy. The real Amon materialized on the crown of a towering crystal, Emmer looking up at the crowned puppet hovering above them. He lifted one shoulder and called up with a grin. Your Majesty, why so angry? Why don't we sit down and talk about how to make the toy kingdom even better? As he spoke, Amon reached into the void as if into a pocket, and with a small, theatrical flourish produced a table. He planted it in midair and waved for the crowned puppet to join him. The puppet ignored the invitation and answered with a hard, furious voice. Intruder from another dimension, why did you take my toys? Amon shrugged, still smiling. Those people aren't even from your dimension. What's wrong with putting them back where they belong? They're the king's toys. That's not yours to decide, the crowned puppet snapped from the sky. Its voice exploded like a command, and more crystal meteorites began to descend, an unceasing hailstorm aimed at the intruder. Hundreds of the blocky, giant dragons Amon's avatar had seen before erupted from the ground and swarmed him. They all attacked at once. Hey, you asked for backup, so don't blame me for calling reinforcements, the avatar called, half joking, and thrust his hand into the void as if pulling something out of thin air. Moments later, a small boy in a white shirt and denim overalls, hair slightly curly, was hauled up from the void. At first he looked dazed, but in an instant he brightened and snapped to attention. He glanced back at the avatar. The avatar gave a wordless shrug that clearly meant, you handle this. The boy wasn't random. He was a historical projection of Amon's primary body, a Sequence 3 scholar of yore from the Fool Pathway. He could draw forth images from the cracks of history, people or objects, and the more intimately he knew a subject, the more real the projection became, with higher reliability and longer duration. When an avatar summoned the main body's historical projection, the result was, of course, guaranteed. Normally, a summoned historical projection has no self-awareness, but a scholar of yore's projection is different. It can become aware and admit the original consciousness into the projection. Right now, Amon's main mind had slipped into his historical projection to help his avatar fight. The Amon shadow lifted his right hand and waved it at the blocky gargantuan dragons. One by one they went dazed. A crystalline monocle blossomed over each of their right eyes, and they shifted into Amon's bizarro sorcerers. Then the Amon shadow turned his gaze to the endless rain of meteorites and snapped his left finger. The meteor shower crashed down, but not a single stone struck the Amon shadow or Amon's avatar. He had lowered the probability of them being hit, and the barrage simply missed. A crowned puppet hovering high above paused its assault and asked in a solemn tone, "Who are you?" Amon shrugged. "I'm just a kid who got pulled out to work. If you really want to call me something, call me Bizarro." Amon Shadow's words cut through the air. Ignoring the crowned puppet's stunned reaction, he waved a hand, and a star door tore open in front of the Amon avatar. "Goodbye," the avatar said, bowing once to the crowned puppet before stepping through. The portal slammed shut behind him, and the Amon shadow slowly dissolved into nothing. The crowned puppet lunged to take control of the pocket dimension, trying to lock the intruder inside, but something intervened. His thoughts went fuzzy, like a curtain dropping over his mind. When he blinked back to awareness, he realized he was trapped inside a strange, disorienting space where his power over the dimension was barely a whisper. For 2 or 3 minutes, he groped through that empty place, fighting to reassert control, until he finally found a way out. By the time he stumbled back into the real world, it was already too late. Amon was gone, disappearing beyond anything the puppet could track. "Bizarro!" he shouted, the name tearing out of him in frustration and loss. Chapter 8. Make a Wish. A starry portal opened on the real moon, and 4 toy astronauts stepped out of it. The lunar plain was as silent and black as ever, stars glittering overhead like distant pinpricks in a velvet sky. "Are we back on the moon?" Pavel asked, voice crackling through the radio inside his helmet as he supported his broken arm. The comms in his suit made even his small voice sound flat and distant. Mikhail glanced over at the pillar of light beside them and edged away from it. "We should be," he said. "This is the same light pillar we encountered before we crossed over. We should be back where we were." For a moment, they were all thrilled, relief at returning, awe at the sight of the portal. Then someone noticed the problem. "Why are we still dolls? Why haven't we changed back? How am I supposed to go anywhere like this? Won't people treat me like a monster?" Mikhail noticed as well. Their bodies were still the toy bodies from that other world. He hadn't realized it right away. He'd been getting used to the shape. He stepped between his panicking teammates and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "The one who saved us before, you know who, must have a way to fix this. He'll know how to change us back. Let's wait for him to show up and ask him for help." Pavel's voice tightened with hope. "Then, when is he coming? Where is he? Why hasn't he shown up yet?" Pavel's question made Mikhail's face go hard. "Pavel, have you forgotten our training? Learn patience. Don't panic." Pavel hung his head a little. "Yes, sir." Of the 4 of them, Mikhail was the senior officer, a lieutenant colonel, and the acting commander. Pavel was a captain, and the other 2 were lieutenants. Mikhail stepped into the leadership role without fuss. "When I came out," he said, "I saw you-know-who preparing something. I think whatever trapped us in that world was still active, and he was buying us time. We'll wait here for half an hour. If he doesn't show, we'll find the lunar lander and try to contact Earth." They discovered that, even in their doll-like bodies, the suits kept them alive perfectly, so oxygen consumption wasn't an immediate worry. "Are you looking for me?" came a teasing voice from behind. The 4 astronauts turned. A stargate had opened up, and Amon Avatar stepped through. There was no atmosphere on the moon, yet his voice reached them as if spoken right beside them. Mikhail, as commanding officer, walked forward and bowed his head slightly. "Thank you for getting us out of that world." He could have sworn he heard the answer. He stopped and looked at Amon Avatar, who, like them, was floating exposed to the void without any protective gear, and asked, "Sir, why haven't our bodies returned to normal? Why are we still stuck in this doll form?" Amon adjusted his monocle and smiled. "When you entered that pocket dimension, its laws assimilated your bodies. The real world's rules are broad enough to accept whatever form those laws have imposed, so the real world didn't force you back to your original shapes." Mikhail pressed him. "Then how can we recover?" Amon's smile only broadened. "It's simple. Make a wish to me. You all have faith. Just as you pray to your gods, direct that faith to me." "Make a wish?" The others exchanged dubious looks. Still, after everything they'd already seen, after they'd literally become toys, the idea of wish-granting didn't feel entirely impossible. "So," Mikhail said, leaning forward, the weight of the moment in his voice, "what should we call you?" Amon Avatar pinched his chin and said, "Then you must remember my honorific name." He paused, then intoned in a grand, layered voice that seemed to come with its own echoing effects. The master of time and space, the thief of destiny, the embodiment of mystery and change. For a moment everyone was stunned by the strange, theatrical announcement. Mikhail was the first to recover. "I'll try first," he said, stepping forward. He folded his hands at his chest in a prayer-like gesture and whispered, "Master of time and space, thy F of destiny, embodiment of mystery and change, I beg you, restore my body to normal." Snap! Amon Avatar snapped his fingers and smiled. "Your wish has been granted." Mikhail's body began to shift. Limbs and contours realigned. His spacesuit stopped feeling like rigid plastic and fell away into ordinary fabric. He looked and felt like a normal person again. "It really worked," he breathed. The other 3 astronauts instantly erupted in excitement at the sight. They all wanted to make wishes now. Amon grinned and warned, "Hey, you 2 who are missing limbs, be sure to wish specifically for your arms and legs when it's your turn." "Don't say I didn't warn you," Amon Avatar said with a small smile. 3 of the astronauts were just about to voice their wishes when his reminder stopped them. 2 of them, those who had lost limbs, stared for a moment, then turned to Amon with grateful eyes. Had he not reminded them, they might never have thought to wish for their missing parts. "Thank you," they said, bowing in thanks. The other 3 astronauts made their wishes in turn. At Amon Avatar's snap, the changes happened instantly. Their appearances returned to normal, and every severed limb was restored. It wasn't Amon Avatar himself who had worked the miracle. He was only the intermediary. The true source of the power was his main body far away on Earth. Once they left the pocket dimension, the barrier that had blocked the link to his main self dissolved, and he could channel power back without obstruction. On top of that, the group had chanted Amon's honorific name, forging a metaphysical connection that let the energy flow. Amon Avatar was, after all, a full pathway sequence 2, a miracle invoker, one who could create miracles and grant wishes through that channel. By granting small favors to others over time and keeping those favors in reserve, he could call on the accumulated goodwill to work miracles, even to grant his own requests when the need arose. Clap, 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 applause rang out. There was no medium for sound where they stood, but they could still hear Amon Avatar's clapping. After everything they'd just seen, none of it surprised them anymore. "Gentlemen," Amon Avatar said, "you have 2 choices. 1, I leave now, and you find your own way back to Earth. 2, I take you back to Earth." That wasn't really a choice. If they had to find the lander themselves, who knew whether it would still be usable? Mikhail spoke first. "We choose the second." The other 3 nodded in agreement. "Sir, do we need to keep your identity confidential?" Mikhail asked. Amon Avatar adjusted his monocle and smiled. "No need. A title is meant to be proud. Why hide it?" "Very well, I'll send you home." He clapped his hands. Starlight washed over their bodies, and in an instant the 4 astronauts were gone. Amon Avatar did not accompany them back to Earth. He surveyed the energy pillars scattered across the moon's surface, gathering them one by one. Then he stood still, looking out over the vast lunar plain, and murmured, "There are a lot of secrets on this moon." Amon Avatar pressed on with his exploration. Back on Earth, the Russian Federal Space Agency was still brightly lit. Teams were working late on the secret lunar orbit project. Suddenly, a pool of starlight converged in the control room, and everyone's attention snapped to it. Wrapped in that light, 4 figures in spacesuits materialized. "It's Lieutenant Colonel Mikhail," someone cried. "Weren't they out of contact? How did they just appear?" another shouted. The control room erupted into chaos. The white-haired commander moved forward at once, adjusting the monocle over his right eye. He broke into a broad laugh. "Excellent, excellent, excellent. Our heroes, welcome back." Chapter 9. Professor X. Amon leaned against the sun-warmed wall of his family's farmhouse and let the afternoon heat soak into his bones. Mikhail had been found. The agency's commander had turned out to be possessed by one of Mikhail's clones, so there was no longer anything to worry about. It wouldn't be long before word reached his parents. Their relief would come soon enough. A small hand suddenly clapped over Amon's eyes from behind. Hey, Amon. Guess who I am?" He grinned. "Is it Charmander?" "Wrong. It's Liana." The little girl's entire body slid through the wall as if it were smoke, and she leapt onto Amon's back. Amon, you're so boring, just staring at the sun all the time. Look at me, I can walk through walls now. She pushed away from him and strode toward the stone, disappearing without a sound, and then stepping out on the other side as if she'd merely passed between two chairs. Liana spun around, triumphant. Amazing, amazing. Amon clapped, trying to match her excitement. Liana folded her arms and pouted. Amon, why do I feel like you're not really praising me? Amon frowned, more surprised than annoyed. I am praising you. That was actually incredible. She sniffed theatrically. You say that every time. It always sounds like you're making fun of me. He sighed and reached up to ruffle her hair. I'm not. You did something cool. Don't sulk. Liana gave him one more suspicious look before her face brightened again. Okay, but promise you'll tell Mom and Dad? They have to see this. Amon smiled. I promise. He meant it. If Mikhail was safe and the worst was past, then maybe there'd be space left for small wonders like a little girl who could walk through walls. Of course I'm praising you. You're my dear little sister. It's big sister, Liana snapped back at once, offended by being called little. After a few more teasing comments, she sank down beside Amon, her face falling. Amon, is Big Brother really still alive? She asked quietly. Father and second brother didn't say anything when they came back. Did Big Brother die? He's definitely alive, Amon said. He's on his way home right now. I'm not a child, Liana protested, but there was a quiver in her voice. You're just trying to comfort me, aren't you? How could I be? Amon said. After a moment he grinned and added playfully, Actually, Liana, I'm a reincarnated god. I can grant any wish you want. If you like, I'll make Big Brother return safely. Liana pouted, utterly unconvinced. You, a god? I don't buy it. If you're a god, then so am I. Amon only laughed. You still don't believe me? He replied, amusement in his voice. Then I'll show you. Amon tucked his hands under his chin and whispered, I wish for us to travel into the galaxy and see the cosmos. As the words left him, the world around them softened. The sun blinked out, and the void filled with a sea of glittering stars that spilled into a gorgeous spiral galaxy. Wow, it's beautiful, little Liana breathed. She had never seen anything like it. Amon smiled, a little proud. See? I wasn't lying. Liana murmured, utterly entranced. For a long moment she simply stared, lost in the view. Then she turned back to Amon, eyes shining with hope. You really can grant wishes, she said. Then I want to wish for this. Please, let Big Brother Mikhail come home safely. Amon gave a single decisive clap. All right. Your wish is granted. Big Brother is on his way home right now. Thank you, Amon. She wiped tears from the corners of her eyes. Don't cry, he said gently. And promise me you won't tell Mom and Dad about this. They'd worry. And don't tell Peter either. Liana nodded, clutching his hand as if holding on to the promise itself. And don't tell them you can walk through walls. Mikhail sat in the car on the way home, still half expecting the world to tilt again. The last few weeks had been unreal. A lunar mission that went wrong, being trapped in another world for more than a month, and then being rescued by a being who might have been divine. Back at the space agency, he'd braced himself for endless questioning. His story involved a toy world and a mysterious entity, after all. But, to his surprise, the debriefing had been short. They took notes, told him he was cleared, and granted him a month's leave. When he'd asked the commander-in-chief about it, the commander had waved him off with a single explanation. You've been missing for over a month. Your family is worried. Go home and see them. Mikhail let the oddities go. They were almost at the farm now, and there were more important things to think about, how Amon and Ilyana were doing. It had been a year since he'd seen them. Someone's voice broke the thoughts. He's here. And the car rolled up the drive. From the window he could see them, his family and friends waiting outside. The agency had called them a day earlier, so Amon and the others were already gathered on the lawn, watching for him. Mikhail scarcely bothered to shut off the engine. He jumped out of the car, left his luggage where it sat, and ran straight into his parents' arms. After a quick hug, he bumped fists with Peter, then turned to the two little ones waiting by the curb. Hey, Amon Ilyana, did you miss your big brother? If Big Brother disappears again, Liana won't play with him, Ilyana pouted. It's great you're back safe, Amon added. Mikhail grinned. Amon's right, I won't disappear again. I've got a month off this time, so I'm going to spoil our little princess. Peter grabbed Mikhail's bag from the car and, watching the family chatter, said, "Come on, big brother, don't stand out here. Let's go inside and catch up properly. Tell us everything you've been up to." "Okay," Mikhail answered, falling into step with them as they headed for the house. Far across the ocean, in Westchester County, New York, at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, Professor Charles Xavier emerged from the cerebro chamber, his dark hair as striking as ever. From there, he routinely scanned the globe with Cerebro, searching for mutants in need of guidance and inviting promising young people to the school to learn how to control and master their abilities. Beast, Hank, came up behind Charles, pushing the professor's wheelchair. As they moved out into the daylight, Hank asked, "Professor, have you found any new mutants?" "I found 3, Charles replied. "They appear to be a family, and they're all together. But they're a bit far, in Siberia." Hank frowned. "Should we go invite them now?" Charles waved him off. "No, we'll go after tonight's evening class. With the time difference, it'll still be night there. We shouldn't disturb their rest." "You're right," Hank said, smiling. "Ha, you're thoughtful even now, Professor." The next day, on Amon's family farm, Mikhail's explanation for his sudden absence had been simple and convincing. During a mission to the moon, they'd encountered a minor solar flare. The electromagnetic surge had fried a lot of the ship's instruments, knocking out communications and delaying contact with Earth. It had taken the astronauts a long time to re-establish a link and get home. Now Mikhail had taken little Liana out to play, laughing with her among the fields. Amon had declined to join them. He was relishing the rare quiet and sun, sitting alone and letting the warmth soak in. Then, without warning, his eyes narrowed. Something was approaching. Amon felt the psychic presence before he saw anything, a familiar, towering wave of thought. He froze and thought, "This is the same mind I felt last night. On Earth, there's only one person with power like that, Professor X. Is he here because he sensed Peter and the others have become mutants?" A moment later, a thunderous roar split the air. A fighter jet, far more advanced than anything from this century, dove down and set down on the open field in front of Amon's family farm. The cockpit door swung open, and Professor Charles Xavier, immaculate in a suit, was pushed out on his wheelchair by Hank McCoy, Beast. It was odd to see Xavier, in nothing but a suit in the Siberian cold. Perhaps he wore thermal layers beneath it. Spotting Amon, Xavier made a small gesture to Hank and had the wheelchair rolled toward them. Pointing at the farmhouse behind Amon, he asked, "Child, is this your home?" Chapter 10. Do not look directly at God. "Yes, sir. If you want to find my parents, go find them yourself. I won't take you there." Professor X and Hank McCoy exchanged a look. Neither expected Amon to answer so curtly. Hank, shoving Charles gently with his shoulder, said, "Professor, was he the mutant you sensed?" Charles closed his eyes, placed his fingers lightly at his temples, and reached out to read Amon's brainwaves. "He isn't the same mutant I felt yesterday," he murmured. "His pattern is different, strange, like—" His sentence cut off. As Charles pushed deeper into Amon's mind, something happened that had no precedent in his experience. The familiar discipline of his own thoughts slipped away. Instead of the steady, orderly stream he could usually steer at will, each thought became a thing with its own will, lurching and twitching independently, doing what he neither intended nor desired. It was not only another person's mind he touched, it felt as if his consciousness had been wired into something far larger, the whole world, or perhaps the entire universe. He tasted an expanse of shifting, complex states, irregular and unfathomable. Distorted, fracturing voices echoed through him. Images of knowledge that seemed vast enough to contain everything rose up, only to dissolve into incomprehension. He recognized a height and scope beyond human comprehension, and yet it conveyed nothing he could understand or remember. The sensation vanished as suddenly as it had come. The link to Amon's mind snapped. Charles exhaled sharply and straightened in his chair. If his legs hadn't been paralyzed, he might have stood. The room still seemed to hum in his ears. He wiped at his nose and found his fingers streaked with blood. Hank, Beast, had clearly noticed. "Professor, what's wrong?" he asked. Charles produced a handkerchief and dabbed the blood away. "Nothing," he said. "You don't look like nothing's wrong," Hank retorted, frowning. Amon's voice cut in, cool and warning. Sir, casually probing other people's minds isn't a good habit. Be careful not to see what you shouldn't. Charles lowered his eyes and without any pretense apologized. I'm sorry, that was presumptuous of me. Even in those few seconds of mental contact, Charles had learned enough. The boy in front of him was not ordinary. He'd felt something like this only once before, when he'd brushed Jean Grey's mind back before he had sealed it. This was different, and it made him very, very interested. It was a power that could unmake and remake everything, and it was anchored to a tyrannical, unstable mind. One small slip could have annihilated the world. Charles had been forced to seal away part of Phoenix Jean's consciousness to keep that terrible power contained. Jean, Phoenix Jean, was the only Omega-level mutant he had ever encountered. Charles Xavier took a breath to steady himself and then asked gently, Child, what is your name? Amon. Amon Rasputin. Just call me Amon. Amon glanced up at the man in front of him, Professor Xavier, and registered that he looked different from Amon's memory. The professor still had hair. He wasn't the bald figure Amon expected, and he appeared younger than the story suggested. Whatever impressions Charles had just registered had been allowed, deliberately, by Amon. Don't look directly at God was the closest way to describe what the professor had felt in those moments. Over the years, as Amon grew and absorbed traits of the Beyonder, he had become something more than mutant, something mythical. Ordinary people who beheld him risked losing their sanity. Some might go mad, even die, simply from the sight. Ever since he crossed into this world and first began using his abilities, Amon had learned to hold back the otherness that came with his mythic nature. If he hadn't, the Rasputin family would long ago have degenerated into monsters, and all of Siberia could have become a wilderness of beasts. Letting Professor X touch a sliver of his essence had been deliberate. A controlled lesson meant to discourage the professor from actually rifling through his family's minds. Professor X's telepathy was formidable. At times it could rival an angel attuned to the psychic arts, but the brief glimpse into Amon's core hadn't changed him. It had been only a warning. The man remained himself, not something more. Heh, Professor X chuckled, lounging where he lay in the sun and showing no intention of getting up. Amon, you ought to be able to feel how you differ from others. I could take you to a place full of your kind, people like you, each with extraordinary gifts. Amon glanced at him and, without getting up, replied dryly, Go ask my parents. Don't interrupt my sunbathing. At that moment, the door of a nearby house opened. Mikhail, drawn by the commotion outside, stepped out and froze when he saw a fighter jet cutting across the sky in the distance. His face tightened. Whatever joke had been happening moments ago vanished beneath a sudden, serious expression. Mikhail slid his pistol back into his waistband and hurried toward Amon and the others. As he walked, he called out, Amon, come here. Big brother, don't worry. They're here to recruit students, Amon replied. As Mikhail drew closer, he saw the visitors clearly and recognized them both at once. They were two of the best-known figures in the mutant community, Professor Charles Xavier and Dr. Henry Hank McCoy, founders of the Mutant Academy, a school set up to shelter and educate mutants. The academy had a reputation for friendliness toward humans and had helped resolve problems between the two groups on more than one occasion. Professor Xavier, Dr. McCoy, Mikhail said, coming to a stop and offering a formal salute. I am Lieutenant Colonel Mikhail Nikolaevich Rasputin of the Russian Federation Air Force. What can I do for you? Professor Xavier inclined his head. Lieutenant Colonel Mikhail, he said politely, may I address you that way? Of course, Mikhail answered. Since you know us, you'll understand what we've come for, Xavier continued. Frankly, we're here to recruit students. Recruit students? Mikhail's voice sharpened. You mean there's a mutant in my family? How could that be? Lieutenant Colonel, please, don't get agitated, Xavier said calmly. Mutants all have special signatures in their brainwaves, Professor X said. My telepathy can tell the difference between an ordinary mind and a mutant one. Yesterday, I picked up 3 mutant signatures from your home. He had meant to confirm by reading Mikhail's mind then and there, and his hand had already lifted toward his temple. But the memory of what had happened the last time he pushed that far made him stop. He lowered his hand. Mikhail's expression went hard for a moment, then he nodded toward the house. Please, come inside. Mikhail said. We'll talk about this properly. You mean me, Peter, and Ileana are all mutants? Mikhail asked in disbelief when they were seated. All three of us siblings? Isn't that? He broke off, shaking his head. He had never heard of a whole family being mutants. Professor X's face was calm and certain. That's right. When I sensed the brainwaves, there was no mistake. You three are mutants. Ileana, sitting on the sofa, gripped the small key hanging on its chain around her neck, as if for reassurance. Peter noticed his younger sister's anxiety and reached out, offering a quiet, "It's all right, Liana." Nikolai had been silent in the corner, watching everything. He finally looked up, met Peter's eyes, and gave a small, steady nod. Piotr, he said, using the older form of his name, show them your power. Hiding it forever isn't a solution. At those words, Peter rose to his feet. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing, and then his body began to change, his muscles swelling, his skin taking on a metallic sheen, even his hair shifting to a metal-like color and texture. Like this, he said. Mikhail stared, stunned. His brother really was a mutant. A thought shot through him. Am I a mutant too? He turned to Liana, feeling suddenly desperate for answers. Ileana, he asked, do you have powers as well? 11. Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Liana stammered, her words dying away. She remembered Amon's warning not to tell anyone about her powers, and felt the old fear rise up. Professor X leaned forward, gentle and patient. It's normal for a girl your age to be nervous, he said. You can't force it. Take your time. Amon, who had slipped into the living room a moment before, sat down beside Liana and offered a small, encouraging smile. Liana, don't worry, he said quietly. Just do the thing you showed me. She took a breath and nodded. Then she walked to the wall, pointed at it, and, under the stunned silence of everyone in the room, simply walked through. Her whole body phased through the plaster, and she emerged on the other side. It wasn't Liana's mutant power at work, but the ability granted by the key Amon had given her. Because she was still so young, Amon had limited the key's capabilities. Phasing through walls was the only ability she could safely use for now. Nikolai, did you know about the children's powers all along, and keep it from me? Mother Alexandra demanded. A cold sweat broke out on Nikolai. What? No, my dear. How could I? You were so down at the time. I didn't want to burden you. And when Mikhail returned, I was so overjoyed I simply forgot to mention it. Alexandra snorted and let it drop. There were still guests in the room, and she didn't press the matter further. When the brief squabble died away, Mikhail turned to Professor Charles. Mr. Charles, you said I'm a mutant, but I haven't noticed any abilities in myself. That's quite common, Lieutenant Colonel Mikhail, Professor X said. Many mutant powers are latent and won't reveal themselves without the right external trigger. You're one of those cases. Pay close attention in your daily life. Otherwise, you could cause an accident without meaning to. Professor X had already correctly identified both of Mikhail's younger siblings as mutants, so Mikhail had no reason to doubt him. I'll be careful, he said. His parents exchanged a look and then nodded at Mikhail, deferring the decision to their eldest son. They had all seen the news about mutants on television enough times to know how hostile the world could be. The parents themselves didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other about mutants, but they couldn't ignore what their children would face outside the home. Peter still needed to start school, and Amon and Ileana were now old enough for classes too. Once classmates found out any of them were mutants, ostracism and worse would probably follow. As an Air Force lieutenant colonel, Mikhail understood those realities better than anyone in the family. Letting him make the call felt like the sensible thing to do. After a moment's thought, he spoke up. All right, I agree to Peter and Ileana attending your Mutant Academy. As for me, surely you wouldn't take a federal officer, would you? He added with a teasing grin. Professor Xavier and Hank, Beast, both chuckled. Ha, Lieutenant Colonel Mikhail, if you want to come, you'd be more than welcome. Professor X said. No, I don't want to go. I want to go to school with Amon. Ileana, who had been listening to the adults, piped up, sounding suddenly indignant. She had already been planning to go to the same school as Amon, and she was not about to be left out. Professor Xavier paused as if remembering something, then added, I almost forgot to mention, your brother Amon is welcome at our school. I can't confirm whether he's a mutant, but I can say he's no ordinary person. He might even be an Omega-level mutant. A level 5. He gives me the same impression as another Omega at my academy. Omega-level mutant, Mikhail murmured. He understood the term. The man in front of him, Charles Xavier, was an Alpha-level mutant, a level 4. Another famous level 4 was the mutant's other leader, Eric Lensher, Magneto, who was wanted by governments worldwide. Both men had made the authorities wary. An Omega-level mutant was a step above them, a level 5, powers that were essentially limitless. You mean Amon can go to that school too? Then I want to go. Liana blurted, excited, and immediately began tugging on Amon's sleeve. You want to come too, right? Amon sighed and gave a helpless smile. All right. If you go, I'll go with you. Amon didn't care. It was all the same to him, no matter where he went. Little Liana, however, was delighted. Yay! We're going to school together, she squealed, clasping Peter's hand. Professor Xavier watched them with a fond smile. These two have such a good relationship, he said, and the remark nudged a memory in Amon, a flicker of childhood when Raven had still been at his side. Another voice chuckled softly. Of course, they grew up together. That's bound to bring them close. In the hangar, Mikhail and Nikolai stood with the parents of the other students, saying their goodbyes. Peter, Amon, Liana, when you get to school, listen to the professor and the teachers, and take good care of yourselves, they warned. The three children returned the farewells and hugs. Take care, father, mother, Amon said, then quietly bestowed a blessing on the two elders, wishing them safety from accidents and illness. It was a small, sincere use of his power, a shaping of destiny to spare them harm. The X-Men's jet, capable of better than Mach 2, made the trip in under 3 hours. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters sat in Westchester County, New York. Not a single building, but a sprawling estate, its grounds and manor serving as both sanctuary and school for those like them. Professor Charles Xavier had been born into wealth. In his youth, he had met Eric, Magneto, and together they had fought for mutant rights and, in their own way, helped save the world. Over time, however, their convictions diverged, and the two men went their separate ways. Charles went on to found the School for Gifted Youngsters on his family estate, opening its doors to mutants from all over the world. Aurora, these are our new arrivals, he said one morning. They're siblings. Please find a few rooms for them. Aurora Munro, codenamed Storm, was a striking black woman with hair the color of snow. She had recently joined the staff at Xavier's school. Gifted with the ability to manipulate the weather and with an inherited magical aptitude, she was classified as a top-tier, level 4 mutant. Because Amon and Liana were still young, they were put together in one room. Peter was assigned to a different dormitory, where a roommate awaited him. After they had finished unpacking and straightening their things, Amon turned to Liana, whose eyes still sparkled with the thrill of the new surroundings. How do you feel, Liana? He asked. Liana, still buzzing from the trip, answered with bright enthusiasm. The plane was amazing. I watched the sun slide slowly toward the horizon until it finally vanished from sight. It went down fast, I said. The X-Men jet was something else, cutting-edge black tech that could reach any point in the world in 2 to 3 hours. Best of all, it didn't need to refuel mid-flight. Its power supply was more than enough. The door opened, and Peter stepped through, followed by a stylish man in sunglasses. Amon, Ileana, you ready? He called. The professor wants to give us some basic instruction. He asked us to head over now. Chapter 12, 2008, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, a classroom. Liana sat slumped in her seat, bored out of her mind, idly twisting a small toy dragon between her fingers, a birthday present from Amon. At the front of the room, Ms. Munro was droning on through another tedious lecture. Liana couldn't be bothered to listen. She could learn everything the teacher said with a single glance, so why waste the effort? She glanced to her right at Amon and was surprised to see him apparently paying close attention, even jotting notes with a pen. Liana narrowed her eyes. She didn't believe it for a second. Quietly, she plucked a pencil from her desk and flicked it at him. The pencil slid through Amon as if he were made of mist. As expected, she thought. The Amon sitting there wasn't real. The real one was probably skipping class again. The thought made her cheeks heat with annoyance. She'd wanted to expose the fake, but thought better of it. If she revealed the projection, she wouldn't be able to slip away unnoticed either. It was smarter to wait for a chance to leave on her own. She could make illusions herself if she needed to, though she knew hers would never be as convincing as Amon's. She snatched at the key pendant at her throat. A slightly dull, almost washed-out copy of Liana shimmered into existence in front of her, a decoy. Then she leaned back, and a faint blue door of light opened behind her, swallowing her whole. The portal slammed shut with a noise that carried all the way to the classroom. Heads turned. "Oh no, I forgot how loud that is," she muttered, then flipped through the air and landed on the grass of the manor grounds with a steady roll. She glanced toward the school one last time and shrugged. "Never mind, I'm gone." Amon was sitting atop the clock tower, legs dangling over the edge. At first glance, it looked like he was sunbathing, but his posture and the way his eyes were narrowed told a different story. He was staring at the sun with every ounce of his attention. Liana opened another portal and stepped out onto the tower roof next to him without so much as a sound. "You're sunbathing again," she said. "What's the point of that?" He chuckled. "I'm not sunbathing. I'm observing the creatures inside the sun." Liana snorted. "Shh! You're trying to mess with me. There can't be creatures in the sun." "Believe it or not, there's a big one growing in there," Amon said, his voice quiet and serious. "It's developing. The day it's born will be the end of the world." Liana made it clear she didn't buy it. "I don't believe you. I already told you. Believe it or not." Amon repeated the words, his gaze fixed on the sun so stubbornly it looked like he was trying to pry something out of it. Liana ignored him and kept talking. "Amon, let's go find Godzilla. A monster that big, that shoots light beams? That's amazing. The news said it's hidden in the deep sea, and with your abilities, you could definitely track it down." 2 months earlier, 2 giant, mantis-like beasts had laid waste to San Francisco. The military had been helpless until Godzilla appeared and dealt with them. His atomic breath had lit up the sky, and Liana had been hooked the moment she saw it. She'd practically declared herself his #1 fan. Amon slid his monocle off, wiped the lens, and snapped it back into place. "I don't want to go." "You should be practicing," Liana said. "You rely on the key necklace's power all the time. You haven't even trained your own mutant abilities properly, and your teleportation is a mess. How are you going to explain that to Peter and the professor?" "What? How did you know about that? You set this up on purpose," Amon bristled. "Besides, I've been practicing. Look," he raised his right hand. Blue energy coalesced around him, shimmering and folding into plates that snapped into place like armor. The glow painted his face in cool light as the formation settled, and for a moment he looked almost proud. Liana grinned. "See? I told you. If you can do that, you can find Godzilla. Come on, on. This could be an adventure." Something like metal, but not quite metal, bloomed into being, sliding and folding until it sheathed her right arm in a single, elegant gauntlet. "Look, isn't it amazing? I even have a lightsaber," Liana said, pride bright in her voice. She focused. An energy blade sprang into existence in her hand, extending slowly until it reached about half her height. It hummed with a clean blue light. Hey, cool, right?" she asked, grinning. Amon adjusted his monocle and allowed a faint, serious smile. "It's impressive to look at, but all flash and no depth, very suitable for a Hollywood blockbuster." Liana bristled. "What did you just say? This is powerful. You're just jealous of how cool it is." Amon pouted theatrically and snapped his fingers. "Armor that only covers an arm? If you're going to play, you should do it properly. Full set." As the words left him, blue light gathered around Amon. The same strange metallic sheen wrapped over his whole body, forming armor identical in design to Liana's gauntlet, but encompassing him completely. Where her piece covered only her arm, his now covered him from neck to toe. The suit was bright silver, its curves graceful, a faint white glow seeping from the seams, noble and quietly domineering. Ileana's eyes went wide as she stared at the armor shimmering around Amon. "How did you do that?" Amon grinned. "It's simple. I saw it once and copied the energy pattern. Nothing to it. You're just too lazy to bother." "Don't use your weird tricks. Fight me properly," Ileana snapped, unconvinced and ready to spar. "All right." Amon held up his hands, then tilted his head and pointed behind her. "Oh, Ms. Monroe, what are you doing here?" Ileana spun around in annoyance, but there was nobody there. You liar, Amon! You tricked me again! Amon put on an innocent face and opened his mouth to protest when he suddenly jabbed a finger behind her again. Miss Munro? You still think you can fool me? Ileana bristled, half angry, half amused. Watch me teach you a lesson. A dry voice floated from directly behind them. Miss Ileana, skipping class again? Ileana froze and turned slowly. Sister Oro, Miss Munro, stood there, looking irritated. What a coincidence, Ileana said awkwardly. I just enjoying the breeze. Come see me later. You need a private lesson, Oro said, annoyance plain in her tone. I didn't skip class, Ileana protested. I came to catch Amon. Look, Amon really skipped class. Liana jabbed a finger over her shoulder, hoping to use him as a shield. She wanted someone else to take the blame. At that moment, the door at the top of the clock tower swung open, and Amon stepped out. I was right, Miss Munro, he called to Oro. Liana would definitely come here if she skipped class. Liana's smile died. She whipped around, and the Amon she'd been pointing at was gone. He'd tricked her. You, she hissed. Amon, skipping class is bad, he teased, ignoring her tone. Hurry up and go to extra lessons with Ms. Munro. Before he turned away, he couldn't resist one last poke. Liana ground her teeth and vowed not to speak to that infuriating boy for the rest of the day. In the Bronx, poverty was common, healthcare resources were stretched thin, and environmental problems made life harder still. Disease rates here had long been the highest in New York City. A middle-aged man supporting a very pale little girl climbed the stairs of a rundown building, reached the third floor, and knocked on a door. A small sign on it read, Cure all ailments. Thump, thump, thump. After the third knock, the door opened. A young man with a monocle opened the door and ushered the two of them inside. Please, come in, he said. Once they were seated, the middle-aged man leaned forward, his voice urgent. Sir, my daughter has leukemia. We've been treating her for 6 months, chemotherapy, everything they recommended, but nothing has worked. Our savings are nearly gone. We heard that patients who come to you often recover when nothing else helps, so we've come to beg, please save my daughter. Chapter 13, Unique Dance Hall. After hearing the middle-aged man's story, the young man gave a slight nod, adjusted his monocle, and smiled. Then you're lucky you found me. Your daughter's illness will be gone soon. He turned his attention to the little girl and softened his voice. My little angel, hold out your hand. There was something oddly compelling about him. Under that look, the girl obediently extended her hand. He took it in his own. The father watched, tense and hopeful. For a moment nothing happened, then the monocle flashed, and the young man released the girl's hand. Sir, your daughter's cured. Take her to the hospital for a checkup, and if anything else comes up, come find me. The man stared, still not quite believing it. The young man had only touched his daughter's hand and announced she was healed. Sir, this... He glanced at his daughter and, to his amazement, saw color returning to her face. She no longer looked so pale. Emma, how do you feel? He asked. Daddy, my body doesn't hurt anymore. I feel so much better, the little girl whispered. The middle-aged man's mouth fell open. For a few seconds he couldn't breathe. Then he pushed himself up from the chair, dropped to one knee in front of her, and hugged her as if afraid she might vanish. Thank God. No pain. You're comfortable. His words came out in ragged gasps. He fumbled in his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and set it on the table. Sir, thank you so much. This is $5,000. I can't offer more. Thank you for saving my daughter. He seemed about to kowtow to the young man, eyes full of gratitude, but a hand gently caught his shoulder and stopped him. The envelope was returned, and a small booklet was placed on top of it. You're a good father, the young man said. Money isn't why I do this. I don't heal people for payment. If you truly want to thank me, read this book carefully. The middle-aged man took the booklet and looked at the words on its cover. The little booklet on the desk had a bold title across its cover, Mysterious Gospel Record. I will. Our whole family will, the middle-aged man had promised as he and his daughter left. After seeing them off, Amon sank back into his chair. The man sitting there was only one of Amon's avatars. There were dozens of them scattered across the world. These avatars stole illnesses from patients by means of a ritual called theft, and by doing so, they healed them. After treatment, Amon's avatars routinely handed out the small book, mysterious gospel record to spread his teachings. Over time, those booklets had earned Amon a growing number of followers. Amon had long since learned that powers tied to authority were taxing to use. With devoted followers and anchors, however, those powers became far easier to wield. His healings were not purely missionary work. Doing good helped recruit adherents, and it also let him accumulate illnesses. Those gathered ailments could be repurposed offensively. Dumping a flood of diseases onto an enemy in battle was an ugly but effective tactic. Another knock came at the door. Amon rose and opened it. Two men in black suits stood on the other side. It was a gray afternoon in Manhattan when Pepper Potts, Tony Stark's long-suffering personal assistant, stood outside a place called the Different Ballroom. Beside her, Happy Hogan, Tony's loyal bodyguard, kept a wary hand near his coat as they approached the entrance. Tony had been missing for nearly 3 months. He'd gone to Afghanistan to demonstrate Stark Industries' Jericho missile, and what was supposed to be a routine demonstration had turned into a disappearance. The press could no longer be contained. Stark Industries' stock was sliding, investors were panicking, and the company needed its founder. More urgently for Pepper, Tony was a person she couldn't simply replace or give up on. In the week since he vanished, Pepper had exhausted every obvious option: military contacts, intelligence agencies, private contractors, and mercenaries. Nothing had turned up. Desperation had made her stand to rumors she would once have dismissed. A business partner quietly told her about the Different Ballroom's owner, a shadowy figure who took any task and somehow got it done, allegedly backed by an organization with reach around the world. So after a round of discreet inquiries, Pepper and Happy had come here to ask for that help. Now, at the ballroom's heavy front doors, she noticed 2 security guards posted on either side, silent, alert, and watching the street with the kind of attention that suggested this was no ordinary events venue. As she approached, the security guards stopped her and tapped the monocle over their right eyes, an obvious signal that a monocle was required to enter the Different Ballroom. Pepper nodded, drew the spare monocle she'd prepared from her pocket, and slipped it over her right eye. Happy, trailing behind her, did the same. Pepper had already asked about the rule and come prepared. Seeing both of them properly attired, the guards stepped aside and let them through. They threaded a narrow corridor and emerged into the main bar. Pepper walked up to the bartender, who was polishing a glass behind the counter, and said, "I'm Pepper Potts of Stark Industries. I need to speak with your boss about something important." The bartender looked them over, then tossed the glass in his left hand backward. It described a perfect arc and settled neatly in the rack. Happy, playing the comic, gaped and blurted, "Wow! Amazing!" Pepper shot him a flat, unamused stare. Happy gave an awkward smile. "Ha ha!" The bartender adjusted the monocle perched over his right eye, and with a courteous nod, told them, "To see the boss, take the right-hand passage. It's the second black door on the 3rd floor." "Thank you," Pepper replied. She led Happy down the corridor the bartender had indicated. They soon reached the second black door on the 3rd floor. Happy knocked twice. A voice from inside called, "Enter!" and the door swung open. What lay beyond was much larger than the exterior suggested. The room swallowed the hallway light. Its true size was impossible to judge from outside. Around a round table, more than a dozen people sat in identical dark suits and monocles, clustered as if absorbed in some private game. Pepper frowned. She had not expected so many. She cleared her throat and began, "Gentlemen, may I?" Before she could finish, someone at the table barked, "Darkness falls. Close your eyes." The command barely left their mouths before the room went utterly black, as if the light itself had been stolen. A few seconds later, the voice rang out again, "Day breaks. Open your eyes." "Number 3, dead." Happy glanced around, half amused. Are they playing werewolf, he wondered. Light flooded the room once more. A young man stepped forward in front of Pepper, gave a very polite bow, and said, "Miss Potts, are you looking for me?" Pepper nodded. She wasn't surprised he knew her name. She was Tony Stark's secretary and fairly well known. "Sir, may I ask your name?" she said. "Klein Moretti." "Just call me Klein," he introduced himself. "Mr. Moretti, I have an urgent matter to discuss with you. Could we go somewhere more private?" Pepper asked, glancing at the cluster of people watching behind her. There were simply too many ears around. Chapter 14. Tony Stark and the Ambulance. Happy, walking a step behind Pepper, felt a niggle of unease. He could have sworn there had been 13 people in the room when they first came in. Now there were only 12. Am I that stressed? Counting wrong? He wondered. Happy could be impulsive at times, but he was a professional. He'd even made a head count as they entered. The mismatch nagged at him, but he chalked it up to a trick of his nerves and kept quiet. Klein led them down a short corridor and opened the door to an empty room. This room is soundproof, he said. If you want to speak privately, this is the place. Pepper nodded, folding her hands. Mr. Moretti, you already know Tony Stark hasn't been seen in a long time. The rumors are true. He's missing. He disappeared after that trip to Afghanistan. I've used every channel I have and come up with nothing. Right now, you're my last hope. I understand, Miss Potts, Klein replied. You want me to find Mr. Stark. Tell me everything you can. Any detail might help. It would help if I could dispatch people to search for Mr. Stark, Pepper said. She nodded as she filled in the details. He was in Afghanistan to demonstrate Stark Industries' latest missile to the military, and then she trailed off, recounting everything she knew before the disappearance. Klein listened carefully, then produced a pen and notebook, as if he'd been waiting only to be asked. He made a few quick notes and looked up. Very well, I understand. I'll notify our people and have them start the search. And how long do you think? Pepper asked before she could stop herself. He surprised her by answering without hesitation. 2 days. We'll bring Mr. Stark back within 2 days. Pepper blinked. 2 days? She had nodded automatically at his confidence, but now a cold doubt crept in. Did he mean they would abduct Tony and return him? You can find Tony in 2 days? I don't doubt your intentions, but that sounds impossible. Klein adjusted his monocle and offered a slight, confident smile. Madam, please trust our capabilities. There are very few things in this world we cannot accomplish. Our people are already in motion. Wait for my news. No more was said. Klein left the room, and when he returned a short while later, he was not alone. Over a dozen people came with him, silent and sharply efficient, as if the promise had already set the machinery in motion. All right, let's continue. On the round table, a translucent insect with 12 visible segments writhed and chittered in a strangely human voice. Hey, 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 the game has just begun, and I haven't even done anything yet. Which one of you killed me? Meanwhile, in the deserts of Afghanistan, Ratchet tore across the sand at full speed, 2 armed helicopters hammering away at it from above. The sand behind them suddenly roiled and split as a drilling machine burst up from beneath the surface and lunged for Ratchet. The attacker revealed itself. Bone Crusher, a massive armored tunneler, claws extended. The cargo compartment on Ratchet sprang open, and Tony Stark climbed out, shouldering a sleeker-than-usual energy cannon. Ratchet, hard right, he barked. Ratchet executed a perfect drift, sliding aside and narrowly avoiding the pounce. Tony took the shot. The cannon, one of Tony's own modifications, struck Bone Crusher cleanly. The Weapon Master's handiwork overloaded the tunneler's systems. Bone Crusher froze, then collapsed, motionless in the sand. The cargo bay clattered shut, and Tony, breathing hard, called into Ratchet's comms. Ratchet, how far to the U.S.? Military base? A mechanical voice, flat but almost pleading, drifted out of the empty cockpit. Tony, according to the coordinates you entered, it's 7 kilometers to the U.S. military base you mentioned. Tony Stark flung the makeshift energy cannon to the side. It had been a desperate, temporary modification, the only weapon they could spare grafted onto his battered Mark I. The blast was devastating, enough to fell a Decepticon like Bone Crusher in one hit, but it would only fire once. He thought back to how he'd gotten here. Kidnapped by terrorists, trapped in a cave, he'd hammered together the crude Iron Man armor from scraps and escaped. He'd aimed for the nearest safe point he could remember, a U.S. military base. He waited and watched the sky for help. Instead, the 2 helicopters that arrived transformed into towering robots and tried to kill him. At the last second, another robot, Ratchet, in the shape of a battered medic bot, intervened and saved his life. Through their stunned, halting conversation, Tony learned the truth. The robot was called Ratchet, an Autobot from a world called Cybertron. The attackers were Decepticons. The Autobots had come to Earth to stop the Decepticons from carrying out whatever plan threatened the planet. Tony stared at the ruined cannon and then at the horizon, counting down 7 kilometers to a base that might be the only refuge left. By a strange twist of fate, he landed in Afghanistan, right in the middle of a firefight. Tony Stark was there, about to be cut down by a squad of Decepticons, and the first thing he saw was the battered, limping form of Ratchet barreling into the fray to pull him out. Ratchet wasn't built for combat. True to his name, he was a medic and a repairer, not a warrior. He carried only a few small missile launchers for self-defense, and everything about him suggested he preferred a repair bay to the front lines. But Tony had improvised. He'd tinkered with Ratchet's limited armament, rerouting power and recalibrating the launchers so a single well-placed shot could punch through a Decepticon's armor. That made a difference. Every time the pursuers closed in, Tony fired Ratchet's weapons, and the Decepticons, wary of taking those strikes head-on, would break off just enough to avoid being shredded. They ran like that across the desert, Ratchet fast enough that the Decepticons could only just keep pace. Each near miss left Ratchet worse for wear. Panels scorched, circuitry nicked, hull pocked with shrapnel and bullet holes. But he kept moving, hauling Tony toward the nearest U.S. military base. By the time they rolled up to the base perimeter, Ratchet looked like he'd been through a meat grinder. The soldiers on guard moved to intercept. A strange, war-scarred robot appearing out of the desert was the sort of thing that set off every sensor in a chain of command. Then Tony stepped out of Ratchet's cockpit, dusty and bloodied but alive, and everything changed. "Tony?" one of the soldiers breathed. Then, faster than protocol, they radioed the news up the chain. The base had been searching for Tony Stark for months. Orders came through in a staccato burst. Let them through, get him to the medical tent, and lock down the perimeter. "Enemies!" someone shouted. The warning came just as the Decepticons returned to the attack. The base erupted into motion. Searchlights traced the sky, anti-air batteries swung into position, and soldiers scrambled to fortified posts. The alarm woke every man on the base. Tony hauled himself out of Ratchet and dropped to a knee beside him. "You're a mess," he said, half laughing, half concerned. "Sorry I keep blowing holes in you." Ratchet's servos clicked painfully as he turned his optics toward Tony. "I am designed to repair, not to fight," he said in his clipped, weary voice. "However, you required extraction." "Yeah, well, you're not getting off easy." Tony already had a hand on his comm module, sending a terse status update. "Get him into the bay, now." A team of medics and mechanics hurried forward, forming a human shield as they pushed Ratchet through the base gates. The Decepticons hovered beyond effective range, probing and skirmishing, but unwilling to press into the improvised defenses once they realized the base was ready to bring heavier weapons to bear. Inside the maintenance hangar, under harsh lights and a flurry of orders, technicians swarmed over Ratchet. Tony stood back, watching, gratitude and worry fighting over his face. "You saved my life," he told Ratchet quietly. "No, I didn't install those upgrades to see you ripped apart." Ratchet's optic sensors softened, a near equivalent of an expression. "I was fulfilling my function," he replied, "but I would appreciate repairs." Outside, the base tightened its security. Reports crackled in. "Sighted. Decepticons, multiple. No ground advance." The commander issued a terse directive: neutralize any threat to the base and secure Stark. For now, the immediate danger had been averted. The larger war had only just found them. Tony watched as the mechanics peeled away scorched plating and began patching Ratchet's wounds. He ran a hand over the desiccated fin of the robot's shoulder. "We're not done yet," he said. "Not by a long shot." Ratchet's servos hummed as his system cycled into diagnostics. "Then we should prepare," he said. "There will be more." And somewhere over the desert, the Decepticons regrouped, their red optics fixed on the base. The temporary safety of the hangar felt fragile, but it was enough, for now. "Be on alert," Tony Stark's voice snapped over the radio. 2 armed helicopters were approaching the U.S. military base. A voice from the tower barked into the comm. "Helicopter ahead. This is a U.S. military base. Land immediately. Shut down your engines and prepare for inspection." "Are you out of your mind?" Tony snapped. "I told you these are hostiles. Order an attack now." For a moment it seemed like the helicopters were complying. They slowed and began a careful descent toward the landing pad. The base commander, trying to calm things, said into Tony's headset, Mr. Stark, no one would dare open hostilities on our base. They're complying. There's no threat. Tony watched the two gunships drift down and felt a cold unease settle over him. They weren't acting like ordinary attackers. Decepticons didn't surrender. He realized what was happening and yelled to the commander, voice rising. "Idiot! They're going to attack. Order defenses to stand by and open fire the moment they move. Now!" "What did you say?" the commander replied, confused. He couldn't imagine an assault inside the perimeter. A metallic screech answered him. The soldiers on the ground froze as the helicopters hit the tarmac. Then, to the stunned gasps of everyone watching, the armored hulls creaked and shifted, limbs unfolding with a series of heavy mechanical crashes. Where two helicopters had been, two towering robots now strode upright across the landing pad. The robots raised their arms. A faint blue light pulsed along their weapons. Tony Stark narrowed his eyes and shouted, "Ratchet!" Ratchet, who had been parked nearby, abandoned his concealment. He transformed instantly into his Autobot form and lunged to shield Tony. A thunderous impact struck Stark in the head, and he went down, unconscious. Ratchet, a medic, not a frontline fighter, did not join the battle. Instead, he crouched over Stark and began administering emergency treatment for the head wound. 15. Tony returns. Two Decepticons had broken loose and were rampaging through the base. The enlisted men could only fight back with personal weapons, rifles and sidearms that did little more than annoy the towering machines. The heavy guns and emplacements weren't ready. The Decepticons tore through them before technicians could get them online. In the command center, an officer barked into a radio, ordering the nearest U.S. base to send immediate support. Technicians hunched over consoles, trying desperately to bring systems back up, when a powerful pulse rolled through the facility. Every screen went dark, every relay clicked off, electronics dead in an instant. "Damn it! EMP!" someone shouted. Outside, the situation was worse. The Cybertronian's armor wasn't ordinary metal. It shrugged off bullets. Small arms fire glanced and bounced, doing nothing but wasting ammunition. Only weapons that delivered brute force, rocket launchers or explosives, had any hope of stopping them. The blasts could at least stagger a Decepticon, carve away at joints, or slow one down long enough for the others to regroup. But with the base's heavy weapons knocked out and reinforcements still minutes away, the soldiers were forced to buy time the hard way, hunkering down and firing what they could in hopes of finding a weakness. At that moment, a man in a military officer's uniform walked up to the unconscious Tony Stark. He adjusted a small monocle over his right eye and laughed. "Heh, what a stubborn life. Managed to survive being hunted by the Decepticons for so long." Ratchet, kneeling as he worked on Stark, turned his massive metal head in confusion. The medic had no idea why a human knew about the Decepticons or what the officer was doing here. A piece of armor shrapnel skittered through the air and clattered to a stop at the officer's boots. Officer Amon glanced up toward the fierce fighting a short distance away and raised an eyebrow. "Two troublesome ones," he muttered. He lifted a hand and casually pointed in the Decepticon's direction. Immediately, the two attackers' movements grew sluggish, as if their joints had gone unlubricated and seized. After a moment, they produced face-sized monocles from somewhere on their frames and pressed them over their optic sensors. With that, they quickly transformed back into their helicopter modes and flew off, leaving the military base behind. The U.S. forces, bloodied and bewildered, stared after them. The enemy had torn through them, and then simply withdrawn. Were they here just to wreck things? Weren't they supposed to be after Tony Stark? Officer Amon crouched beside him, raised his right hand and slapped the unconscious man. The hit left Tony's left cheek red and swollen. He coughed, doubled over, and slowly woke up, still groggy. "Why does it feel like someone slapped me?" Tony mumbled. Ratchet's optics flickered beside him. Even the robot hadn't expected that sort of rescue. Tony reached up to feel his cheek, then yelped and tried to raise his right hand. "Oh, damn it, my arm! What happened? Is my hand broken?" Ratchet stiffened. He had checked just moments before. The only serious damage looked to be to Tony's head. The arm shouldn't have been this bad. Amon watched them with calm eyes. "Mr. Stark, I saved you. To wake you, I transferred the injury from your head to your arm, moved the damage to a less vital area so you could be roused. You understand, right?" That was the magician's damage transfer. What? How did you do that? Are you a mutant? Did you just slap me? Tony demanded, still rubbing his throbbing cheek. Amon's expression didn't change. I'm a medic. It's my duty to save people. No thanks necessary. Also, Miss Pepperpotts asked me to bring you back, Officer Amon added. Tony was about to snap. Who had the nerve to treat him like this? But when he heard Pepper's name, he couldn't help but blurt out, Pepper, did she find your unit? Amon chuckled. No, she wasn't looking for the military. She was looking for our different ballroom. Tony frowned. Different ballroom? He'd never heard that phrase used that way and didn't know what to make of it. Before he could ask more, he turned to Ratchet. What about those 2 Decepticons? Did the military catch them? Ratchet's voice was hoarse. No, your army couldn't stop them. Didn't even put up a fight. Then, for some reason, the Decepticons just ran off. Ran off? Tony repeated, eyes narrowing. He looked back at Officer Amon, neatly dressed, unruffled, and a suspicion hit him. You let them go, Tony said flatly. Wow, Amon replied with mock admiration. As soon as I said it, the great genius Stark figures it out. Tony raised an eyebrow. The line was true enough, but it was the way Amon said it, smug and sarcastic, that grated. Amon shrugged. All right, you're back on your feet, so I'll be going. And remember to look after Miss Pepper. He gave a small, almost unreadable nod and turned to leave. Pay the man the reward. We agreed on it. Officer Amon said it coolly, handed Tony Stark a card, and then vanished as if swallowed by the air. How did he do that? Optical cloaking? Tony asked Ratchet. Ratchet tilted his head and gave a metal shake. He didn't know either. Tony glanced at the card. In neat print it read, Different Ballroom, Klein Moretti. Different ballroom, Tony repeated aloud, folding the card between his fingers. That's where he wanted me to go. At that moment, soldiers who had been gathering around closed in on Ratchet, rifles trained. This robot looked different from the other 2 they'd encountered, but robots all the same, and very dangerous. Voices snapped commands until someone cut through them. Put your guns down. He's with Tony Stark. Colonel Rhodes, who'd been tracking Tony since Afghanistan, came running up. Seeing him, the troops hesitated and then obeyed, lowering their weapons but staying tense, fingers ready on triggers. Tony, good to see you, Rhodes said as he reached them. Where the hell have you been, and what's with the big robot? Tony let out a relieved breath at the sight of his friend, visibly more at ease, but he kept his expression serious. Rhodes, my business isn't important. He's an Autobot. Earth's in trouble. I need to contact the president. Oh shit! New York. Tony Stark, wrapped in fresh bandages, climbed down the ramp of a military transport. Colonel Rhodes walked at his right side, steady and formal. At the airport exit, Pepper Potts was waiting. The moment she saw Tony, she hurried forward and threw her arms around him. Pepper, you look exhausted. Are those tears? Missing your boss already? Tony teased, voice rough with a half-smile. Pepper's face looked drained, her eyes rimmed red. She stepped back, wiped at the corners of her eyes as if there were tears there, and gave a shaky little laugh. I'm just happy I don't have to go find a job. Pepper, I want you to meet a friend, Tony said, gesturing toward the plane. Ratchet, come out. The rear hatch of the transport rolled open. A green and black vehicle rumbled down the ramp and stopped beside them. Pepper peered at it, bewildered. Is this one of your new toys? An unmanned car? Why does it look like a wrench? The machine's voice came smooth and clear. Madam, I am Stark's friend. I am Ratchet. It talks, Pepper said, astonished. Is it Jarvis? Tony shook his head. No, he's not a Jarvis unit. Ratchet's a real silicon-based life form from Cybertron. He's the one who saved me out in the desert, I said. Pepper gave a soft, astonished gasp. Tony, do you know him? Tony reached into his pocket and handed her a business card, the same one Officer Amon had given him. Pepper read the name aloud, eyes widening. Klein Moretti. Tony, how do you have his card? Yesterday I went to him for help finding you. He said he'd get you back within 2 days. I didn't expect him to actually do it. Chapter 16. Autobots Collection. The dormitory at Xavier's Institute was quiet except for the television in the common room. Amon lounged on the sofa, eyes glued to the screen as a news anchor announced, Stark Industries' weapons division will be shut down, effective immediately. It should have been a headline like any other, but Amon wore a small, private smile. Yesterday, he'd tracked several blazing meteorites and realized they were Autobots. He'd managed to nudge one of their entry vectors, Ratchet's specifically, so it would land in Afghanistan instead of in the United States. If he hadn't intervened, Ratchet would have shown up on American soil. Just then, Liana came in, hair in a messy braid, her expression dark. She caught sight of Amon stretched out on the couch, and after a beat, heat rose to her cheeks. "You're just sitting there watching TV?" she snapped. "I was stuck with Aurora's tutoring all morning." Before he could answer, she sprang across the room and landed on him, her fists flying. Amon laughed, hooked her wrists, twisted, and pinned her to the cushions. "You said you wanted to get out," he reminded her casually. "Something big's going to happen in New York. I can sneak you out." Liana's struggling slowed as curiosity replaced indignation. "Really?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "There's going to be a robot war, Autobots and who knows what else. It doesn't happen here every day." She shoved his hands away, flipped off the sofa, and jumped to her feet, all eagerness now. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." "Tony, why are you shutting down Stark Industries' weapons division? You'll ruin the company." Obadiah Stane snapped, bewildered and furious. He had never understood why Tony would do something so drastic. Tony looked at him coolly. "Obi, don't say another word. I have more important things to do and no time to explain. Don't bother me." Obadiah felt his chest tighten. He forced the words out between clenched teeth. "You're just like Howard, so proud and self-righteous. Do you think Stark Industries belongs only to you? The company's strength is the result of my life's work. I won't let you destroy it. I've already moved to the board to have you removed as CEO, citing your long absence and mental instability." "Do whatever you want," Tony said, voice flat, and turned to leave. As Tony's figure receded, Obadiah couldn't help himself. "Tony, you'll regret this." From down the corridor, Tony's voice came back, light and cool, but landing like a blow. "Obi, I am the master of Stark Industries." "Damn it! Damn Stark!" In the cavernous expanse of Tony's lab, Ratchet had shifted into his Autobot form and was crouched over the operating table, treating the ragged wound in Tony's chest. He muttered under his breath as he worked, angling a medical light and probing with precision tools. "Why didn't that, you-know-who, fix the wound in my chest, too? He must have left it on purpose." Ratchet cleaned and disinfected the injury with steady, efficient motions. The makeshift care Tony had received from Ethan back in the Afghan cave had been enough to keep him alive, but it had been rudimentary at best. If Ratchet hadn't taken over the sterilization and repair, Tony might already have died from infection. "I should replace this old arc reactor," Ratchet said, more to himself than anyone else. "I see you've already prepared a new one." He tapped the dull, battered arc reactor embedded in Tony's chest with the tip of a scalpel, testing the fit. The instrument looked absurdly small against the robot's massive metal fingers. The lab door opened, and Pepper stepped inside. Her voice came out soft and guarded. "Tony, did you call me down for something?" She kept her tone low because of the sight that met her. A giant metal Autobot half-kneeling at the table, one massive, multi-jointed arm holding a scalpel mere inches from Tony's exposed chest. Though the scalpel was tiny compared to Ratchet's frame, Pepper noticed it immediately. Tony lay half-reclined, eyes fluttering, breathing shallow. She had to force herself not to let her voice tremble. "Tony, are you okay?" she whispered, afraid that raising her voice would startle the Autobot. Pepper stepped into the workshop, and Tony's face lit up the moment he saw her. "Pepper, you're just in time. I really need you here," he called. She moved closer and froze at the sight of a towering robot, several meters tall, standing in the room. "This is?" she asked. A synthesized, oddly emotional voice answered. "Madam, I have already introduced myself. I am Ratchet." Pepper blinked. "Ratchet, you were a car earlier. I didn't realize you could transform." Tony, propped up on an operating table, smiled weakly. "Ratchet's an Autobot from Cybertron. He can switch between humanoid and vehicle modes." Pepper's eyes dropped to the ragged hole in Tony's chest. "Tony, why did you call me? And what is that in your chest?" He glanced down at the opening and then back at her. "I called you for this. Help me take out the light, the thing, in my chest and put a new one in. I think you're the best person for the job." Pepper bristled and leaned in for a closer look. "Tony, that's not a light bulb. It looks like a miniature arc reactor, the kind they used in the tower. Tell me, what exactly happened to you? Pepper asked. Tony shrugged, trying for casual. It's nothing really. A little shrapnel got in and the electromagnet needs to hold it in place. That bulb there is the power source for the electromagnet. Pepper didn't buy it. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You're not being careful. That doesn't sound like what you just said. You're still hiding things from me. Pepper, you're the one person I trust, so only you can change this arc reactor for me. Tony's voice softened. He looked at her with an intensity she rarely saw. For a beat, there was something almost vulnerable in his expression. Under that look, Pepper finally relented. Don't even think about asking me to do this again, she warned. Ratchet turned his back, not wanting to watch the exchange. Once Pepper had swapped in the new arc reactor, she held the old one in her palm and asked, "What should I do with this?" Tony waved a hand, indifferent. "Destroy it, burn it or something." Pepper frowned. "It would be a shame to destroy it. It has sentimental value. I should put it in a display box." "Whatever you want," Tony muttered. Pepper left with the old reactor tucked carefully away. Tony could be hands-off. Pepper simply couldn't. Stark Industries was in chaos, and Tony had plenty on his plate. Ratchet watched him for a moment, then spoke in a flat, serious voice. "Tony, I have to warn you, the reactor in your chest is dangerous. Palladium can leach into your bloodstream and cause heavy metal poisoning. The best course is to remove the shrapnel, but that would require major surgery." Tony waved him off with a practiced impatience. "We'll talk about that later. Didn't you say a few other Autobots came with you? Have you told them where to meet?" "Stark Industries is the most advanced facility on Earth. If we work together, it could be a huge help in stopping the Decepticons." "I've already alerted them," Ratchet replied. "They all landed in the U.S. and should be here soon. We came together. I'm not sure why I ended up in Afghanistan." He sounded puzzled. He had expected to land with the others on American soil. Tony's eyes lit up, the distraction he needed. He'd been thinking the same thing for minutes. "Ratchet, you must know a lot about Cybertronian tech. I want to see what I can learn from it." "To beat the Decepticons, let's design a new generation of Iron Man suits," she declared. Ratchet's optical sensors pulsed as he considered her words. He cocked his head and asked, curious, "You mean the Iron Man suit you were wearing when we first met? That thing was remarkable." She gave a short laugh. "That was a prototype, flawed and hasty. What I have in mind now won't be an off-the-shelf suit. We're building something revolutionary." Chapter 17, Hoover Dam. A cosmote shimmered open above the Colorado River, and Amon stepped through. Liana followed, curiosity written all over her face. She looked up at the bright sky and frowned. "This doesn't feel like New York," she said. "The sun's in the wrong spot." Amon smiled. "Good observation. You're thinking, we're not in New York anymore. This is the Hoover Dam." He watched her for a moment, approving. "Hoover Dam is in Nevada. There's a 3-hour time difference from New York. It's afternoon back in New York, but only noon here." Liana beamed with pride. "Of course. I'm really smart." "But what are we doing here? Is this place even fun?" she asked. "Plenty of fun," Amon replied with a hint of mischief. "You've always wanted Scott's motorcycle, right? Well, there's something even better here, something that can give life to mechanical creations. After this, you'll have a motorcycle that can transform into a human." Liana's eyes lit up. "Really? Where is it?" "Besides this big dam under my feet, I don't see anything special," Liana said. Amon chuckled. "There's more to it than just a dam. In fact, the dam was built for one particular thing." Liana stamped her foot on the concrete. "You mean that thing's inside the dam?" Amon let his eyes travel over her outfit, a black, form-fitting mesh top, shorts and stockings, and smiled. "Not like this. Your clothes won't do." She looked down at herself. "What's wrong with this? Operatives from the special department don't dress like that." He snapped his fingers. A puff of smoke rose and wrapped around her. When it cleared, Liana was no longer in revealing streetwear, but a smart, tailored suit, all business and efficiency. Amon's own clothes changed at the same time into a white lab coat. He looked every bit the scientist. He rested a hand on her shoulder, and in the next instant, they vanished from the dam's outer wall and reappeared inside. The interior was a vast hollow chamber, brightly lit, humming with activity. Workers moved between walkways and consoles, drones flitted overhead, and banks of equipment glowed along the walls. "It's huge in here, and look at all these people," Liana breathed. "Come on," Amon said, waving her forward. "I'll show you something interesting." He stepped ahead and threaded into the crowd. "Why are you walking so fast? There's so much more to look at here than the training rooms at the academy." Liana hurried to catch up. They passed row after row of staff, who greeted Amon and Liana warmly, as if they already knew them. Liana leaned in and whispered, "How do they all seem to know us?" Amon answered calmly, "I'm a researcher here, and you're listed as a junior supervisor. Of course they know us." Liana's eyes narrowed. "Aren't we supposed to be undercover? Did you plan this ahead of time, or did you use your power to tamper with their minds?" "Guess," Amon said. Liana pouted and reached out to pinch his waist, but missed. Her attention was pulled elsewhere. Towering before them stood a humanoid machine, tens of meters tall, sleek metal and exposed servos that somehow looked both graceful and brutal. Liana's face lit up. "Is that the robot you told me about? It's enormous. Is there a cockpit? Can I go in and pilot it?" "You've watched too much Gundam," Amon said with a small smile. "This isn't a piloted suit. It's an intelligent being, technically a silicon-based life form, an alien." He glanced at her. "So, is he your target?" "I feel like having a big robot would be pretty cool," Liana said. Amon shook his head. "Take care of Lockheed first. In your hands, he's just a plush toy. And that robot you're talking about isn't something you want. It wants to destroy humanity." "Then forget it. Lockheed wouldn't destroy humanity." She squeezed the plush dragon that hung at her waist. That was Lockheed. Normally, he took the form of a stuffed toy for Liana to keep, but he could transform into a giant battle dragon when needed. Amon had pulled him out of the toy dimension during his second visit, the same Pak et realm that had trapped Mikhail and the others, and the crown doll had been furious about it. Below them, engineers and scientists in white lab coats clustered around the feet of a massive robot. They argued and scribbled on clipboards, their voices small under the machine's looming bulk. Among the lab coats, one figure in a black trench coat stood out, a tall black man who looked slightly out of place amid the technical atmosphere. Nick Fury had been on edge all morning. The military had just sent word. An alien mechanical creature had attacked a U.S. base in Afghanistan. Anything that involved extraterrestrials was S-Shield's business, and as director, he had been pulled into the briefings as soon as the report came in. Standing there, watching the giant machine and listening to the frantic updates, Fury's calm exterior masked the knot of concern tightening in his chest. 13 years ago, the Kree fleet had invaded Earth. Back then, Fury had counted on Captain Marvel and the Avengers to turn the tide, and they hadn't come. This time, there was no Captain Marvel either, and the Avengers he had hoped for still hadn't materialized. Only the mutants seemed to be holding their own. The X-Men were doing surprisingly well. Fury let out a long, tired sigh. When someone mentioned a mechanical creature, Fury's mind immediately jumped to the giant robot S-Shield had uncovered decades earlier. That machine had been studied for years, the source of much of S-Shield's reverse-engineered tech. Fury had come with the suspicion that the aliens who attacked the U.S. military base were searching for that same robot, and he'd hoped to find answers here. So far, though, his hopes looked like they would go unfulfilled. Amon ignored Fury's mounting frustration and took the lead, guiding Liana down the corridor. "We're not after the robot," he explained as they walked. "We're after the Tesseract, the Allspark. It's the animating core of those machines. It's their soul, and it can give life to other machines." They stopped in front of a heavy, guarded door. Amon waved, the two sentries tapped a sequence on the panel, and the door obediently opened. Amon stepped inside. Liana followed close behind. Beyond the threshold stood an enormous cube, 4 or 5 stories high. It was silver gray and covered in delicate, interlocking patterns that pulsed faintly as if hinting at a hidden energy within. The Tesseract hung at the center of the chamber, tilted and tethered to a tangle of tubes. Liana gaped. "Wow, this is even bigger than that robot. Is this what you were looking for?" "It's enormous. Is it for Godzilla to play with?" Amon walked beneath it. Faint, almost invisible steps hung in the air, and he stepped on them one by one until he reached the middle of the giant structure. Several researchers worked nearby, but they paid him no mind and continued with their instruments as if nothing unusual were happening. Liana tried to follow, wanting to look cool, but after several failed attempts she called up to him from below. "Hey, that trick is amazing. Teach me when we get back." "You'll have to practice," Amon said coolly. He laid his hand on the tesseract. Tiny cubes began to bloom across its surface and then contract. The whole thing folded and rotated in impossible ways, like a real tesseract conforming to higher dimensions. Within moments, the massive object compressed down to the size of a human head, resting in Amon's palm. Chapter 18. Artemis Amon held a small tesseract in his left hand. With his right, he reached into the void and drew out a second, enormous tesseract, identical to the first. After a moment's display, he returned the larger one to where it had been. Liana stared. "Is that the historical projection you mentioned earlier? You actually pulled something like that out of the void?" Amon landed lightly and tossed the tesseract in his hand to her. "This is called the Allspark," he said. "Whatever you do, don't let it touch any electronic or mechanical device. If it does, it will turn them into mechanical beings driven by aggression and violence." Liana frowned. "Then how am I supposed to use it? You said you'd give me a transforming motorcycle. How can I use the Allspark if it makes machines violent?" Amon smiled. "That's simple. The reason machines activated by the Allspark become violent is that most of Earth's electronics are built from technology reverse-engineered from that huge robot outside. When the Allspark awakens them, they inherit the aggressive programming encoded in that salvaged tech. We just need to introduce an activation error to prevent it," Amon said calmly. "I don't understand," Liana admitted, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's normal not to get it yet. You still have a lot to learn," Amon replied, almost teasing. Liana raised an eyebrow. Every time she talked with him, she felt like he was quietly mocking her, but she didn't dwell on it. She was used to his tone by now. She followed Amon out of the shield base beneath the Hoover Dam. As they left, Amon gave a casual wave to Fury, who looked genuinely bewildered by the greeting. They stepped through the Stargate and reappeared in New York. The gate shut with a soft hum behind them. Liana took in the familiar skyline and asked, curiosity edged with worry, "This is New York. Why are we back? Is the robot war starting?" Amon looped an arm around her neck in an almost affectionate, teasing way and smiled. "No, I brought you a gift. Weren't you just saying you wanted a living robot?" Being looked at like that made Liana flush. She pushed his hand away and stammered, "Who said anything about wanting a gift? You're the one who said you'd give me one." "I was just reminding you," Amon protested. All right. My fault for not giving you the gift on time. That's on me." He lowered his voice into an exaggeratedly gentlemanly tone. "So, little princess, would you come and see what I've prepared for you?" Liana turned away before she answered, forcing herself to sound casual. "Fine. I forgive you. Now hurry up and show me the motorcycle you bought." She kept her voice steady because she knew how Amon loved to tease her. Every slip earned her a long, merciless ribbing. "Don't give him anything to work with," she told herself. "Don't hold back now. The surprise is just ahead." Amon called, already striding off. Liana stamped her foot and hurried after him. "Wait for me, Amon." They reached the entrance to the different ballroom. Liana paused and glanced at the sign. A motorcycle would be in a place like this? "Come on," Amon said, pulling her inside. 2 security guards by the door saw them and swung the entrance open. "Boss! Miss Liana!" they called in unison. "Boss!" Liana blurted, surprised. "When did you open a place this big?" "How come I don't know?" Liana leaned in toward Amon, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Amon only smiled. "There's a lot you don't know. I've done a lot of things." He led her through the ballroom to a small side room. The space felt deliberately mechanical. Chrome and matte metal surfaces, banks of glowing instruments and other high-tech gear lining the walls. In the center of the room sat a single enormous gift box. Liana's face lit up. "You got me a present?" she said, already moving toward it. "I'm opening it." She started to unwrap the box, then decided handwork was too slow. With a quick motion, she condensed a sliver of lightsaber in her hand and sliced neatly along the seams. When the lid came away, the thing inside gleamed under the lights. A motorcycle, entirely silver gray. its finish mottled with patterns like meteorite craters. The frame was a double-spine design, the main beam splitting and running forward and back, creating sharp, angular lines that brought to mind fighter jet air intakes. From the fuel tank to the tail, the body flowed in a single aerodynamic curve. "It's awesome!" Liana exclaimed, swinging a leg over the seat. The bike fit her perfectly, as if it had been built for her alone. "This motorcycle was my design," Amon said, pride warming his voice. "It has a breathing function, and the paint actually shifts with your emotional state. When you push it past a certain speed, the whole bike erupts in a dazzling purple glow, like a streaking meteor. The frame's forged from adamantium and vibranium, so it's practically indestructible." Liana's eyes lit up. "Amon, I love it. This is perfect. Consider every tease you ever gave me forgiven." He only smiled. After a moment, he reached into his coat and produced the Allspark, a faintly glowing cube. Earlier, she'd turned it back to him because it felt too big and awkward to carry. Now he tossed it into her waiting hand. "Place it close to the bike, and it'll come alive," he explained. Liana turned the cube over, studying the soft light within. "Just set it on the motorcycle? I don't have to do anything else? You said that when something comes to life, it can get violent." Amon's smile deepened. "You don't need to do anything else. With me here, there won't be any problems," Amon said. At that, Liana stopped hesitating. Curiously, she set the Allspark on the motorcycle's chassis. Amon snapped his fingers. "Transformation begins." Energy rippled outward and the bike shuddered and hummed. Metal plates flexed like muscle. The fuel tank split and folded into chest armor. The front forks twisted and elongated into arms. The engine swelled into a glowing core reactor. The wheels disassembled and reassembled into treaded feet. The rear hub rotated and unfolded into shoulder missile pods, and the headlights reformed into bright blue optical lenses. A current of blue energy ran through the machine until the motorcycle had become a fully formed humanoid robot. The newly activated robot scanned its surroundings, found Liana and Amon, and dropped to one knee. In a cool, feminine synthetic voice, it intoned, "Two masters, thank you for granting me life. My name is Artemis." Using the authority of error, Amon had deliberately introduced an anomaly into Artemis's activation sequence. The glitch kept her from registering with any faction. She belonged to neither the Autobots nor the Decepticons, nor to any other Cybertronian group. She now belonged solely to Amon and Liana. "The goddess of the hunt. I love that name," Liana said, surprised and delighted. She hadn't expected the robot to be so impressive. Artemis replied in a clear, obedient voice, "Artemis is honored and happy to serve her master." Amon's tone was decisive. "Artemis, from now on you will be Liana's maid and guardian." "Yes, great creator," Artemis answered, her response steady and serious. 19. Drag racing creator. That really fits your arrogant personality, Liana shot back. "Come on, Artemis, let's go for a spin outside. I want to see what you can do," she added. "Yes, miss," Artemis replied, falling into step behind her. At the door, Liana glanced over her shoulder at Amon and couldn't resist a parting jab. "You coming, arrogant one? Want to hitch a ride with this miss?" "Sure," Amon answered with an enormous grin. The smile froze Liana for a beat. Then she forced her features back into place. With Amon's temperament, she realized it would never be him who wound up embarrassed in a tease. If anyone was going to look foolish, it would be her. Refusing to give him that satisfaction, she hurried him out the door. "Fine," she said. "Today I'll show you exactly how strong I am." Outside, Artemis shifted smoothly into motorcycle form. Liana swung onto the seat first and patted the space behind her. "Get on, arrogant one," she said. Far away, on a New York street, 2 police officers were idling in their cruiser, shooting the breeze, when a streak of purple light thundered past. Both of them went still, eyes locked on the blur. The speed gun began to beep again, but instead of showing a number, the screen flashed an error. "What's wrong with this thing? Broken?" one officer muttered, tapping the unit against the patrol car's hood. The gun they used could read up to 322 kilometers per hour. The other officer stared at the display, then swore under his breath. "Jesus! Something's moving so fast it's frying the reader. It's like there's a plane driving on the road. I couldn't even get a lock. No trace at all." The first officer glanced toward his partner and asked cautiously, "Boss, what do we do?" The older sergeant shrugged and gave a tired snort. "What else can we do? Chase them? Our gear's useless, and we didn't get a visual. There's nothing to chase. Right, we didn't see anything, the younger officer agreed, and they walked back to their car, baffled. Inside Tony Stark's private lab in New York, Tony and Ratchet were making the final adjustments to the armor. Ratchet hovered over a console, hands busy with a panel. Tony, even if the design looks flawless on paper, we should run some tests first, Ratchet warned. No need, Ratchet, Tony shot back with a grin, strapping a gauntlet into place. The Stark way is to learn to run before we learn to walk. Ratchet rolled his eyes as servos whirred and the suit sealed around Tony. The armor was fully configured and powered up. Ready. Jarvis, boot the system. Let's go. Tony barked to his AI. Yes, sir, the synthesized voice replied. He snapped the helmet down. The armor's interface began to lock, plates sliding and magnetizing into place until the suit was whole. The thrusters in the boots and gauntlets flared, belching superheated exhaust. The blast ripped a jagged hole in the garage ceiling. Ratchet swept up the falling rubble, then poked his head through the new opening to glare at Tony, who was already streaking away. Awesome, this is way more fun than racing, Tony shouted. Sir, your heart rate is elevated. It's at 120, Jarvis warned in his ear. Don't worry about it. What's our speed? Current speed, 753 kilometers per hour. Power output, 30%. Tony grinned at the readout, then a quick purple flash caught his eye on the road below. Jarvis, what just went past? Sir, that was a motorcycle. A photo of the bike projected on his HUD, blinking into view at his cheek. A silver motorcycle streaked down the road, two figures hunched over it. The speedometer had already pegged at 800 kilometers per hour. Did they slap a jet engine on that thing? Tony muttered, stunned. That was cruising speed for a small plane. Curiosity edged into excitement. Jarvis, get eyes on them. Intercept. Affirmative, sir. The Iron Man armor dove, engines screaming, cutting in behind the bike. It shot past the two police officers they'd passed earlier. A voice crackled over the radio. Boss, did something just go by? Yeah, the other officer answered, looked silver. On the motorcycle, Liana felt a rush that made her chest burn with adrenaline. Buildings and streetlights melted into streaks of light at her periphery, an entirely new sensation. She laughed despite herself. Miss, an unidentified flying object is pursuing us, Artemis reported calmly through her headset. Wait, something can still catch up? Liana glanced down at the dash. The digital readout read 800 kilometers per hour. How could anything close on them at that speed? She looked back and saw it. A silver robot, closing fast, an armored figure streaking up behind them, engines a-roar against the wind. What is that thing? Amon, sitting in the back, had noticed Tony closing in a while ago and laughed lightly. Just a playboy, Liana. Don't let him pass. Can a playboy really pull something like this off? Liana wondered, then called to the car. Artemis, can you go faster? Don't let that guy catch up. Yes, miss. I can engage acceleration mode. Then do it, Liana snapped. The vehicle obeyed. Panels shifted, the twin exhausts reconfigured into jet nozzles, and brilliant purple flames roared out. Artemis surged forward. The air around them tore with the strain as they shot past the speed of sound. A faint purple energy field flickered into being around the car, cutting through the turbulent airflow. It has that too. Amon, you really thought of everything, Liana said, impressed. At ordinary speeds that shield wouldn't be necessary, but at supersonic velocity, it was essential. Without it, the shock and wind pressure would pin passengers to their seats and make movement impossible. Amon and Liana's bodies weren't ordinary, though, so Artemis had held the field back until it became unavoidable. Now it had kicked in automatically as the car punched through the sound barrier. Tony's eyes widened. What he saw next froze him in his tracks. The motorcycle shattered the sky, pushing past supersonic and leaving a clear Mach cone in its wake. Jarvis, did you see that? Was that a Mach cone? Tony asked. Yes, sir. According to my calculations, the vehicle just reached Mach 1.03. Tony's eyebrows shot up. How are they doing that? And how are their bodies even surviving it? Jarvis, set power to 50%. We have to catch them. Sir, the armor is still in its testing phase. Running at that level could cause unexpected failures, Jarvis cautioned. Don't argue, Tony snapped, voice cool. Do it. No one beats me, Tony Stark. The iron armor surged. With a violent lurch, it pushed forward and quickly closed the gap on the motorcycle Artemis. As they drew near, Tony could make out the riders, a young man and a young woman, the woman at the controls. Neither of them wore helmets. Tony opened his mouth to shout, to demand how they'd managed to break the sound barrier without protective gear. But the roar of airflow in the distance made that pointless. Unless they had some kind of communications gear, they wouldn't hear him at all. Jarvis, analyze how they did it. The scan finished almost instantly. Sir, Jarvis reported, the vehicle's exterior is enveloped in an energy shield that isolates interior airflow and pressure from the outside environment. It also incorporates an unidentified jet propulsion system capable of pushing it to supersonic speeds. Energy shields? Tony said, incredulous. They actually have energy shield technology. His mind jumped ahead. If their shields were real and this developed, they weren't just experimenting. They had a working, mature system. That meant one thing to Tony. He needed to meet whoever built it. Chapter 20, Optimus Prime and Ironhide. Tony piloted the Mark II, waved at the two figures ahead, and made a motion to get them to stop. Liana ignored him completely. Artemis, step on it. Leave him behind, she called over her shoulder. Tony kept up the gesture, wanting to talk, when the man behind them turned his head. He smiled, a grin that tugged at the edge of Tony's memory. Then the man flicked something at Tony as if tossing a business card. The slip of paper seemed to come free of the air itself, unaffected by the whipping wind, and slapped against Tony's faceplate, momentarily blotting out his HUD. Tony peeled the card off, wiped it clear, and scanned the spot where the two had been. They were gone. Jarvis, where did they go? He asked. Sir, Jarvis replied, they accelerated to Mach 132 and headed east toward Queens. Jarvis, intercept them. Apologies, sir. Mark II is an experimental model. The jet system currently installed was not calibrated for these conditions. Calculations indicate intercept will be difficult. Tony stared at the card in his hand. His expression shifted. He already had one exactly like it, and that was why the smile had felt so familiar. It's different ballroom again. I need to find an excuse to check it out, Tony muttered, then turned to Jarvis. Forget that mysterious guy for now. Jarvis, take us up. Let's see what this suit can do. Yes, sir. Tony had meant to visit the organization that had once rescued him, but things kept getting in the way. Between Afghanistan, aliens, and non-stop work on the new Mark, he'd never found the time. Now, on impulse, the suit pivoted and shot skyward. Freed from traffic and civilian restrictions, the Iron Mark climbed past the cruising altitude of airliners and kept going. The digital altimeter climbed into the stratosphere, around 70,000 feet, and still rising. What's the SR-71 Blackbird's altitude record? Tony asked. The SR-71's record is approximately 85,000 feet, sir, Jarvis replied instantly. Records are meant to be broken. Up we go. Tony grinned. They pushed higher for several minutes. Then Tony noticed the suit's joints starting to stiffen. Movement grew sluggish. Sir, high-altitude icing is forming. This could create a significant safety hazard, Jarvis warned. Tony, still buzzing from the climb, waved the concern away. Keep going, he said, ignoring the warning. The jet in his boot hiccuped, spat a shower of sparks, and cut out. Power flickered through the Mark, then died. Jarvis went dark. The cold at that altitude had frozen the suit's systems. For a moment, Tony kept climbing on inertia, then the world tipped and he began to fall. Jarvis, open the wings. Break the ice, Jarvis, he shouted into an unresponsive headset. No answer. He fumbled for the manual release at his hip, trying to pop the side wings himself. His glove crunched against the frozen shell. The ice had fused onto the suit, and his hand wouldn't move. Shit, he muttered, cursing the weakness he blamed on months of being kidnapped. He fought the lock with everything he had. At last, much closer to the ground, he managed to wrench the switch. The side wings burst free, cracking the ice that had caked the seam, and the armor's systems began a ragged restart. There's not enough time, he said aloud. He ran a quick altitude calculation in his head. There was no catching it. He was going to hit. Jarvis, head for the sea! Jarvis flickered back online. Landing on the water was the only option Tony could think of. He wasn't far from the shore. He could get high enough to put down over the ocean. Yes, sir. Warning, warning, unknown object crashing. What? Tony blinked. In the sky above New York, what else could be flying besides a genius like him? Then the suit shuddered as something struck the mark. The armor went into a violent tumble, metal screamed and clanged, and finally it smashed down. Tony tore the helmet open and immediately retched. The last seconds of the fall had been a brutal, nauseating blur. As he hauled himself upright, he heard a deep, unfamiliar voice. "Human, are you all right? I am Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots." Tony pushed himself up and squinted toward the sound. Towering over him were red and blue mechanical legs, 3 or 4 meters tall. Above them, a mechanical head, about half his size, turned, its optical sensors narrowing and bathing him in a cool blue light. Tony peeled off the remainder of his helmet and collapsed back on the ground, half laughing, half relieved. "Big guy, thanks. I almost had to take a cold shower." Optimus Prime tilted his metal head. This human was different from the others he had met since coming to Earth. There was something unusual about him. "Human, you do not seem surprised," Optimus said. "Do you know of me?" "Name's Tony Stark," the man replied with a grin as he pushed himself up. "You can call me Mr. Stark. Ratchet mentioned you, Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots." Headlights swept toward them from a distance, an ambulance and a black pickup. The two vehicles pulled up in front of Tony and Optimus, and with a chorus of grinding servos they unfolded into their Autobot forms. Ratchet and Ironhide stood where the vehicles had been. "Tony," Ratchet said, hurrying over, "I had a feeling something was going to happen to you. Fortunately, Optimus got here in time and caught you." Tony waved him off, too proud to admit the truth. "Ratchet, thanks," he said, "but I had a way to land safely. I just hadn't used it yet." He wouldn't say aloud that if Optimus hadn't been there, he might have ended up in the sea. Tony stared at the cannon-laden Autobot and asked Ratchet with a grin, "Who's the cannonball over there?" Ratchet blinked, then realized who Tony meant. "Tony, this is Ironhide, our weapons specialist, a seasoned warrior." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Cannonball. That's quite an arsenal you've got." Tony offered his hand, still smiling. Ironhide answered in a low, gravelly voice, "Nice to meet you, Iron Man." He was a bot of few words. Ratchet had already patched the hole in the ceiling from the last time Tony had crashed through it, but Tony had cut a new opening beside it. He hadn't punched through a wall this time. Optimus was simply too large to get into the lab any other way. Tony settled back into his chair and turned to the 3 Autobots. "So the Decepticons came to Earth looking for something called the Allspark," he asked. "What is it, like a spiritual totem?" Optimus Prime, crouched in the cramped space, nodded. "You could think of it that way, though it's not entirely the same. The Allspark is a physical object, the source and the destination of our souls. It can give us energy, and it can create our kin." Tony paused to think, then asked, "What do you mean by create your kin?" "Any electronic or mechanical device touched by the Allspark's power will be transformed into a Cybertronian," Optimus Prime replied. "The Decepticons are almost certainly trying to use the Allspark to build an army and provoke a war." Optimus had answered Tony's question, but his conclusion was grim.